Chapter 607. This soul pillar is... King Shi looked at Ling Xiao with a puzzled expression, but when he saw the latter's calm expression, a trace of fear appeared in his heart. Master, I've overstepped my boundaries. Pill Elder was no longer the almighty Pill Emperor of the Western Border. He was just Ling Xiao's soul slave. No matter how confused he was, he didn't dare to open his mouth to ask. Come here to refine pills in the future. Ling Xiao casually threw the two elders onto the soul pillar. Demonic runes lit up one after another, transforming into chains that wrapped around the two of them, binding them. An indescribable devouring power gushed out from the chains and began to corrode the bodies of the two elders. The soul pillar was a technique from the Ghost Clan's classic, the Dark Yin-Yama scripture. It could absorb one's soul and spiritual energy. Ling Xiao's hand seals changed. Visible spiritual energy turned into a dark river and flowed out from the two Pill Emperor's bodies. It gathered on the square and spread out like a spider web. Then Ling Xiao flicked his finger lightly, and 10 streaks of fire fell from the sky and landed on the spiritual light, jumping around nonstop. In a short moment, a spiritual energy fire array was formed. In the future, you don't need to use your spiritual energy to refine pills. Just use this array. As everyone knew, cultivators needed to use their spiritual energy to create a fire and control it with their soul power. The consumption of both was very demanding on one's mind. Moreover, Han Zhan and the others were only divine generals. The spiritual energy in their bodies was limited, so the efficiency of refining pills was naturally low. But now, with the two Pill Emperor's spiritual energy nourishing the spiritual energy, they only needed to use their soul power to control the fire. Damn! It was as if they had accidentally achieved a breakthrough in their technique. Of course, the spiritual energy that Ling Xiao had set up was just a wisp of its power. It wasn't the source of the spiritual energy. Otherwise, with Han Zhan and the other's strength, they would have been familiar with it, let alone control it. The disciples of the Hall of Medicine looked at each other and swallowed hard. Although the spiritual energy on the two Pill Emperors had dimmed, the wisp of Pill Emperor's power was real. Gulp. Strangely, they felt that it was good to be a tool. At the very least, they would not be reduced to animals that produce spiritual energy like these two God Emperors. Ling Xiao, you'll die a horrible death. The two elders cursed angrily, their expressions filled with grief and indignation. It was easy to imagine the shame and anger in their hearts right now. The elder of the sacred cult, who used to be high and mighty, had fallen to such a state. It was sad and lamentable. Old Pill, break their teeth and pull out their tongues. Remember to refine medicinal pills every day and feed them. Make sure they're full of energy. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently and nodded slowly. These two emperor gods should be able to last for a few years. Yes, Master. The disciples of the Hall of Medicine bowed and did not get up for a long time. Only after a long while did they burst into cheers. We don't need to use our lives to refine pills anymore. Master's actions are actually showing concern for us. With a master like this, what more could this servant ask for? Ling Xiao, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. The two elders of the sacred cult screamed in despair. Their voices were extremely desolate. I'll eat pills refined with my own spiritual energy, make sure I'm full of energy, and then provide you with spiritual energy to refine pills? It seemed like they were forever moving. Demon. This Ling Xiao was simply a demon. Ling Xiao stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. Xiong Huan followed closely behind him without saying a word. Xiong Huan, I'm here, in the Sky Demon Palace. Is there a white-haired woman? Ling Xiao's eyes were filled with vicissitudes of life, and his voice was low. Ever since that day when he saw the soul consciousness in the Sky Demon's skull, there had always been a figure in his heart that had not dissipated. That feeling was like a kind of fetter. He always had a vague feeling that that woman was inextricably linked to the Sky Demon and even the Sky Demon's fall. White-haired woman. Xiong Huan frowned slightly. Master, there are many white-haired women in the Sky Demon Palace. May I know which one you're asking about? Many. Ling Xiao was stunned for a moment. It's a beautiful young girl who can use the Tao of ice and snow. Tao of ice and snow. Xiong Huan's frown deepened. There is indeed a demon general in the Sky Demon Palace who is proficient in the Tao of ice. However, she is not white-haired, but black-haired. Furthermore, she is not a young girl. Is there no one else besides her? Ling Xiao was puzzled. If she was not an expert from the Sky Demon Palace, why would she save him? Furthermore, could she have sensed that the Sky Demon had been reborn? No. Xiong Huan's tone was very certain. It seemed that the white-haired girl was not an expert from the Sky Demon Palace. Freezing a world with a thought. Could she be from the immortal race? However, why did Ling Xiao feel a sense of closeness from her that came from the same source or even from the same bloodline? Master, it's okay. Wait for me for a day. As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao's figure instantly disappeared and reappeared in Heavenly Hall. However, just as his figure appeared, his eyes suddenly narrowed. In front of the Sky Palace, a tall and slender figure stood there quietly. There seemed to be a demonic aura circulating around her. In front of her, Ning clenched her fists tightly. There was a trace of embarrassment on her face. I don't want to fight with you. I can't beat you. Ling Xiao stood on the spot and frowned slightly. For a moment, he thought that Folded Shadow had transformed and was playing with Ning. However, that was not right. Although the demonic aura around the tall woman was terrifying, her cultivation level was only at the first stage of the divine Marquis realm. Most importantly, he could sense a strong, beastly aura from her body. She had short black hair that reached her ears, giving her a sense of valiance. Her tight, black scale armor accentuated her curvaceous figure, giving her a unique feeling. Among all the women Ling Xiao had seen, Qin Wushuang was considered the tallest. However, compared to the woman in front of him, she was still lacking. At this moment, her back was facing Ling Xiao. Therefore, he could not see her face. However, just her back was enough to make one's imagination run wild. Who are you? For some reason, Ling Xiao felt that this woman's aura was somewhat familiar. But it shouldn't be. Master. The short-haired girl slowly turned around, revealing her fair and beautiful face. Her facial features were beautiful, especially the blood rune between her eyebrows. It added to her allure. You are Hua. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed, and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. However, the black-haired girl let out a charming smile. In a flash, she jumped into Ling Xiao's arms. Master, I succeeded in transforming. Hua's voice was extremely charming. However, Ling Xiao just stood there blankly. Feeling the surging sensation in his arms, he swallowed hard. But, aren't you a male? Originally, Ling Xiao thought that since the demonic dragon lusted after women, Hua must be a male dragon. But why? Inexplicably, Ling Xiao suddenly remembered that Hua liked to stay with him. He felt a little. However, although Ling Xiao subjectively thought that Hua was a male dragon, he had never verified it. However, it seemed that this demonic dragon's hobby was quite strange. Chapter 608. Master, I'm a female. Floey looked up at Ling Xiao pitifully. There seemed to be a demonic sun floating in her dark eyes. It was indescribably evil. However, this immortal face was simply too cold, aloof, and chiseled. If it weren't for those prominent parts, it could be said that it was difficult to distinguish her gender. In fact, in Ling Xiao's opinion, if Floey disguised herself as a man, she would be able to capture the hearts of countless girls without needing to disguise herself. Her beauty was more like a wild valiance. Devouring Tao Law, first grade divine Marquis. The original body of the primordial sky demon dragon, also known as the primordial sky devouring ancestral dragon. Legend had it that the primordial ancestral dragon was the creator of the Tao and controlled the heavenly Tao. Later on, the primordial world changed and the witch race rose. The witch god sacrificed billions of living beings and cursed them to die. However, with the strength of this demon race ancestor, how could he die so easily? Therefore, his soul, blood, spirit, armor, eyes, teeth, horns, demon core, and heart turned into 9 dragons and rose from the primordial world. The primordial sky, devouring ancestral dragon, was one of them. Although the demon race lost the war between the witch race and the demon race and left the stage of the new era. However, the 9 ancestral dragons were all brave, especially the sky demon dragon. It was said that he had once swallowed 3,000 worlds and billions of living beings. His cultivation level was supreme. Of course, rumors were just rumors. Floey's strength was still low, but her devouring talent was already showing signs. Needless to say, this demonic dragon would definitely become Ling Zhao's assistant. More importantly, the ancestral dragon, primordial phoenix, and Qilin races were the totems of the demon race. Even after countless years, the influence of these 3 primordial creatures was still unparalleled. Therefore, one day, when Floey returned to the demon realm, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. There were thousands of universes. Ling Zhao believed that the demon race would definitely stand in the vast land of the upper world. Okay, I got it. But Floey, can you get off me first? Ling Zhao smiled helplessly. It seemed that the system's products were indeed excellent. At least the ancestral dragon sacred blood and Qilin sacred blood were worth it. Oh, Hua Hua smiled brilliantly, revealing her snow-white teeth. Only then did she let go of Ling Zhao and stand to the side. Brother. At this moment, Ning who stood in the distance, called out softly, and there was a wisp of embarrassment on her little face. Ning Ling Zhao's eyes were clear, but his heart skipped a beat. First-grade divine general, law of strength. Immemorial Dong Wang, sacred body. For 1,000 providence. Like I said, the more miserable the birth of these people, the higher their talent. Based on Ning Er's model, he was abandoned by his parents when he was born and lived with his mother-in-law. In the end, the granny was robbed of all her money. The two of them concealed their identities and suffered all sorts of ridicule and disdain. They were no different from beggars. In the end, even Granny died. How old was Ning Er? At the age of 11 or 12, she had actually experienced the ups and downs of life. She was clearly the princess of an empire and the daughter of a country's war god, but she was living in a dilapidated thatched cottage and was struggling to get by. Therefore, from the moment Ling Zhao saw Ning Er, he knew that this young girl would become a great person in the future. As expected, the law of strength was the immemorial Dong Wang, sacred body. With such talent, even the top prodigies of the Shengzhou in the central border, no, even the prodigies of the upper world would be far inferior. Although Hua Hua and Ning had only comprehended one law of strength, whether it was the law of devour or the law of strength, they were the best of the 3,000 laws of strength. If Ling Zhao had not combined 9 laws and created the Sky Demon World Devastator path, perhaps he would have been tempted. Ning Er, you've broken through? Ling Zhao smiled and reached out to rub Ning Er's little head. Now, Ling Zhao had 3 Lolas, including Feng Ling. However, who would complain about having too many Lolas? After all, their styles were different. Cute and gentle, arrogant and rude, or cold and noble. Each had their own merits. Brother, I've broken through. Ning Er smiled sweetly, looking a little proud. Perhaps no one would have thought that this little girl before them would actually possess divine energy that could destroy the ages, right? The name of the Dong Wang was well known in the 9 heavens. He was the first mighty figure to unify the demon clan in the ancient times, and his talent was divine power. He destroyed 8,000 domains with one punch, and there were no more immortals in the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Ning Er, on the other hand, had comprehended the law of strength of this demon clan saint with the body of a human. This was somewhat strange. Could it be that Ning Er had other karma? Inexplicably, Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed slightly, but he more or less had some guesses in his heart. This so-called sacred body and talent could never appear out of thin air, and they would more or less be tainted by the karma of the heavenly Tao. Hua Hua was an exception, as she was a product of the system. Therefore, even if the ancestral dragon had fallen and no longer existed, she could still appear out of thin air. However, Ning was different. She was originally from this world, but she had comprehended the law of strength in the wordless heavenly book and awakened the immemorial sacred body. This was somewhat thought-provoking. This was getting more and more interesting. Primordial karma, the era of demons, devils, immortals, and Buddhas. Ning, when you studied the wordless heavenly book that day, did you see anything? Ling Zhao's tone was calm, but his eyes were filled with anticipation. Although neither the ancestral dragon nor the Dong Wang could compare to his identity as the sky demon. However, if Ning really had something to do with this demon clan saint, that 4,000 points of providence was definitely not her limit. Even Ling Tian's template might be far inferior to hers. What did you see? Ning Er's little face froze, and she thought for a while. Her two long ponytails looked extremely cute. Brother, I think I saw a very bright light. Very, very bright. So bright that I couldn't open my eyes. A very bright light? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. As expected, this girl had some background that he didn't know. There seemed to be many sounds, and one of them was very loud. Bell. Yes, brother, what's wrong? Ninger looked at Ling Xiao with some confusion, but the latter only smiled gently. It's all right, Ninger. Since you've comprehended the law of strength, then Big Brother will help you find a suitable spiritual treasure in the next few days. Thank you, brother. Ninger smiled sweetly, but Ling Xiao looked at Floey meaningfully. Floey, follow me to do some things. Yes, master. Remember, outside, call me young master. As soon as he finished speaking, Ling Xiao and Floey's figures instantly disappeared. Cold Moon, Celestial Palace. Today, the Celestial Palace no longer had the holiness of the past. Only broken walls and withered trees were left. Even the spiritual aura in the mountain showed signs of collapse. At this moment, Qin Wushuang stood with his hands behind his back in front of the palace at the top of the mountain. There was a faint trace of worry in his beautiful eyes. It had been a day. Ling Xiao and the 3 people of the sacred sect had disappeared for an entire day. Although Qin Wushuang didn't know where the 4 of them had gone, but he was inexplicably worried. Beside him, Han Qingqiu's expression was calm. Only the remaining disciples of the Cold Palace hung their heads and appeared incomparably lonely. The palace master was dead, and all the elders were killed. There was no longer a celestial palace in the western border. Junior Sister Han, where should we go? Many disciples gathered around Han Qingqiu, their faces somewhat pale. Let's disperse. Han Qingqiu's tone was cold, but in the ears of the disciples, there was a trace of heartlessness. You, Han Qingqiu, you have no heart. How did the palace master treat you? Don't you know? Now that the palace master is dead, and all the elders are dead, as the successor of the celestial palace, shouldn't you regroup and revitalize the celestial palace? Revitalize the celestial palace? Han Qingqiu shook her head slightly, and a white figure was reflected in her eyes. Although I have taken revenge, the sacred sect has not been eliminated. My wish is to accompany him to ascend the 9 heavens. As for the Cold Moon Celestial Palace, what does it have to do with me? Chapter 609. Just as the disciples at the top of the mountain were enraged and yelling at the top of their lungs, suddenly 2 figures slowly walked over from the sky. Among them, the white clothes that contained immortal charm instantly made Qin Wushuang and Han Qingqiu's beautiful eyes flash with joy. Young master, Ling Xiao, what's going on? Ling Xiao's figure descended from the sky and looked at the many disciples of the Cold Palace before him. Behind him, Hua Hua's expression was cold and arrogant. Her eyes moved between Qin Wushuang and Han Qingqiu. However, when she felt the coldness flashing in Ling Xiao's eyes, her delicate body trembled. She snorted hatefully. Humph! Now that I have transformed, I will also take all the beauties in the world. Lord Ling Xiao, you came at the right time. Now that the immortal palace has been destroyed, I hope you can help us rebuild the sect. The disciples' eyes were full of expectation. Only Ling Xiao raised the corner of his mouth with a trace of playfulness. No need to be so troublesome. I have already thought of your path. As soon as he finished speaking, Before those disciples of the Cold Palace could react, they saw a wave of power from the sky and directly absorbed their figures into the territory. Just right, my Sky Demon Palace is still lacking a group of tools to do odd jobs. Since you don't want to leave, then stay here forever. Ling Xiao, how are you? Those three elders of the holy sect. Han Qingqiu rushed to Ling Xiao's side with a trace of worry on her face. Others might not know, but Han Qingqiu knew about the relationship between Ling Xiao and the holy sect. During the battle, just now, she obeyed the order to hide in the mountain and did not show herself. However, at the last moment, Ling Xiao and the three people of the holy sect disappeared together. It still made her feel a trace of faint uneasiness. Fortunately, since you are back, I am afraid those three people of the holy sect are most likely dead. As for those hundreds of disciples of the Cold Palace, I advise you to disperse. You have already repaid your fellow disciples. Now that you have fallen into my hands, it is your good fortune and you deserve it. Not far away, Qin Wushuang's footsteps suddenly stopped. Especially the concern on Han Qingqiu's face, it made her feel an inexplicable sense of loss. In the end, those 2 days were all the fortune of her life. It's fine. Wait for me here. Now, the 9 dragons' heaven-imprisoning formation only needed 5 more dragon veins to reach perfection. The 7 dynasties of the western frontier were destroyed. However, the dragon vein was still there. Perhaps it would give birth to true dragon providence in the future. Since Ling Xiao planned to let Qin Wushuang control the western border, of course he would clear all obstacles for her. After collecting all the dragon veins in the world, only Great Qin would be left. As such, the Qin dynasty was the orthodox one, occupying the fate of the western border. With Han Qingqiu leading the way, it would save a lot of time. All right, Han Qingqiu gently nodded and retreated behind Ling Xiao. Wushuang, I will send you back to the court first. Ling Xiao smiled gently. At this moment, there was no trace of demonic qi being emitted from his body. Instead, there was an abundance of Taoist rhyme and a feeling of purple qi surrounding him. Yes, in the end, Qin Wushuang did not ask any more questions and walked down the mountain side by his side with Ling Xiao. At this moment, there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. She knew that perhaps she would not be separated from Ling Xiao for long. Ling Xiao. With this thought, Qin Wushuang took the initiative to hold Ling Xiao's arm and pressed her entire body against his. Let's go. I will accompany you for the next few days. Ling Xiao gently patted Qin Wushuang's shoulder. Behind the two, Ning Tiance Xiao Beifa and the others followed from 100 miles away. When the group reached the horizon, Ling Xiao's figure suddenly appeared on the mountain peak. He coldly watched the purple qi pure Tao body disappear. Now, he did not know whether the Divine Master still had the soul tablets of the Holy Sect's elite. Therefore, he used the Tao body as bait and placed it in the trap. Once the Divine Master came, he would definitely go to the Great Qin dynasty to find Ling Xiao. At that time, his main body would be able to deal with it. If the Tao body was fine and the Divine Master did not come, it would prove that the Divine Master really did not know about the death of the Divine Envoy. In this way, Ling Xiao could come to the southern border in the name of the Holy Sun. After all, Meng Yuan was in charge of the Holy Sect. No matter how one looked at it, it was a kind of experience. According to Ling Xiao's speculation, the Divine Master did not know about the arrival of the Sky Demon. Therefore, he most likely thought that no one in the Shengzhou would dare to disrespect the Holy Sect. Meng Yuan had not returned yet. She was just training in the mortal world. Everything was flawless. However, Ling Xiao was more or less confused about Meng Yuan's identity. Since she was the holy son of the Holy Sect, she should have enjoyed supreme honor. But why did the Divine Master deliberately hide her identity? Even the people of the Holy Sect did not know about her background. Moreover, when Ling Xiao captured Meng Yuan just now, he realized that there was a wisp of demon aura sealed in her body. This made Ling Xiao feel that there was something fishy going on. If his sky demon power had not entered Meng Yuan's body, he would not have noticed it even with his divine soul as a 7th stage divine emperor. Could it be that Meng Yuan was the illegitimate daughter of the Divine Master and a demon? The Divine Master of the Holy Sect taught his disciples to slay demons, but he hid the secret of her demon body from her. However, since the Divine Master handed over the power of the Holy Sect to a young girl in her early 20s, it showed that he trusted Meng Yuan very much. In this way, this girl might become an important chess piece for Ling Xiao to destroy the Holy Sect. Haha, Miss Meng Yuan, I heard that you are good at running the Holy Sect. I would like to hear more about it for the rest of my life. However, would Meng Yuan's Dao heart be completely shattered when she found out that she was a demon one day? Inexplicably, Ling Xiao suddenly thought of the glazed ancient pagoda in his soul sea. The Divine Master, the ancient pagoda Yi Fan, by Jiro, Meng Yuan, the previous successor of the Sky Demon, and Yi Qingchan. What was the relationship between these people? Master, on the peak of the mountain, Han Qingqiu looked at the young man, standing with his hands behind his back. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. She turned her head and looked at the horizon. She was somewhat confused. Why did Master come back? Let's go. Let's collect the treasures of the Holy Sect first. Then we will go to the imperial capitals of the other empires. Ling Xiao turned around and walked toward the back of the mountain. Han Qingqiu did not ask any more questions. She followed closely behind him and disappeared. The Cold Moon Holy Sect was established by Yi Luo Yun 1,000 years ago. Its treasures were terrifying. Compared to the Holy Sect seemed to have existed for a longer time. Therefore, when Ling Xiao followed Han Qingqiu to a secret ancient palace in the back of the mountain, even with his temperament, his face was filled with shock. There were countless spiritual treasures and elixirs placed in rows in the palace. There were even some peerless Dao artifacts and 7th-grade spiritual elixirs, especially the golden halberd placed in the middle of the palace. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed and the corner of his lips curled up into a smile. Just then, the runes on the halberd flowed and turned into the shape of a dragon. It roared and howled. This halberd is called the Sky-Piercing Halberd. It is said to be made with divine metal from the upper world. It weighs tens of thousands of pounds. Even a god emperor would find it difficult to unleash its true power. This halberd has a spirit. Nobody has ever tamed it. Though it is an inherited treasure of the Holy Sect, nobody has ever been able to use it. Han Qingqiu looked at Ling Xiao strangely. She did not understand why her master was so happy. A treasure of the Holy Sect. With just one look, Ling Xiao was shocked by the power of the halberd. Good stuff. And it's perfect. Chapter 610. Young Master. Han Qingqiu looked at Ling Xiao in surprise as he walked up to the halberd and held it in his hand. In an instant, the entire ancient palace was filled with the roar of a dragon. A ray of golden light shot out, and a terrifying murderous intent turned into a boundless vision. One could vaguely see the shadow of a golden dragon breaking through the sky. It descended from the sky and turned into a golden halberd that stood in the void. Around it, there were thousands of rays of light and thousands of Dao patterns. The sun and moon lost their light, and the universe turned upside down. Heaven and earth seemed to be floating under the halberd. Even with Ling Xiao's divine power, he felt a great pressure coming from his hand. Even, there seemed to be a wisp of power that was struggling and showing its unwillingness to admit defeat. How dare you struggle? Ling Xiao roared angrily. Behind him, a demonic aura suddenly shot into the sky and turned into a 100-feet-tall demonic figure that intimidated the world. In his hand, the golden halberd let out a sorrowful cry. The golden dragon on it roared and finally turned into a ray of light and disappeared. In the main hall, Han Qingqiu looked at the heaven-breaking halberd in horror. The respect she had for Ling Xiao grew stronger. A treasure that even an emperor god could not tame was like a toy in the hands of her young master. Suddenly, Han Qingqiu felt a sense of inferiority. Her talent was top-notch in the entire Xingzhou. She had 3 Daos and natural spiritual meridians. Her body was a 9th-grade divine pill. Her sensitivity to the spiritual aura of heaven and earth was far beyond that of a living being of flesh and blood. But in front of Ling Xiao, she still seemed so small. Even a right to stand beside him was like a gift from her young master. Qing Xiao, see if there's anything you like. Take it. Ling Xiao took out his universe ring and collected all the spiritual treasures and elixirs in the hall. Beside him, Huahua's eyes flashed with greed. But under the deterrence of Ling Xiao's demonic aura, she did not dare to act rashly. Thank you, young master. Han Qing Xiao bowed slightly and glanced at the treasury. In the end, she picked up one of the Dao swords and stood beside Ling Xiao. Let's go. After collecting the dragon vein of this cold, moon immortal palace, it is time to go to the other empires. In the end, Ling Xiao kept all the treasures in his bag and headed towards the back of the mountain with Han Qing Xiao and Floey. As long as it was an ancient sect, their dragon veins would definitely be terrifying, especially for immortal sects like the cold moon immortal palace that had existed for thousands of years. Their foundation was terrifying, and they had produced many experts. It was not only because the martial arts of this sect came from the upper realm, but more importantly, the dragon vein occupied a portion of the qi of heaven and earth. Although they were both in the western border, it was clear that the spiritual aura on this celestial mountain was much denser. If one cultivated here all year round, one's comprehension of the great Tao and the improvement of one's cultivation would be immensely beneficial. Ling Xiao stood with his hands clasped behind his back in the depths of the immortal mountain. He looked at the straight mountain peak before him with a calm gaze. At this moment, he could feel that this peak was overflowing with spiritual aura and Tao will. This should be where the dragon vein was located. Of course, with Ling Xiao's current means, it was still a little difficult to suppress the dragon vein. But with Xiong Huan here, everything was different. Buzz! An earth-shattering buzz resounded, and Xiong Huan's figure suddenly appeared in the void. At this moment, there was no trace of demonic will on his body, but his ferocious appearance still made Han Qingqiu's beautiful eyes narrow. Capture this dragon vein into the realm, Ling Xiao said indifferently. Xiong Huan immediately bowed, then walked to the front of the mountain and punched out. Boom! The entire mountain range crumbled in an instant, and a golden dragon figure let out a long roar towards the sky. However, before it could soar into the sky, Xiong Huan's figure had already descended from the sky. Above his head, a 300-meter-tall bear figure stood between heaven and earth, and with an aura that could suppress eternity, it stepped on the dragon vein. Pucci! Golden light scattered all over the sky. Xiong Huan reached out with both hands, grabbed the dragon vein in his hands, and lifted it in front of Ling Xiao. Buzz! The power of the realm descended, and Ling Xiao and the others instantly disappeared on the spot. In the Sky Palace, Ling Xiao looked coldly at the 6 winding dragon veins above his head, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Ning-er, what do you think of this halberd? Beside him, Ning-er's little face was stunned. She saw a huge golden halberd appear out of thin air, quietly floating in the air. The Tao runes on it flickered, revealing a destructive aura. Brother, Ning-er covered her red lips with her little hand, looking pleasantly surprised. This is for me? Yes. Let's see if it suits you. This halberd was about 9 feet long, 1 foot taller than Ling Xiao. Therefore, when Ning-er's little hand held the halberd, it looked a little strange. However, the moment the two touched, a ray of golden sun scattered from the sky. Then, the golden halberd was filled with mighty divine power, and a golden dragon floated in the air. What was different from when it was in Ling Xiao's hands was that this halberd's consciousness clearly carried a hint of joy. Damn! As expected of the destined one. Someone gave you a pillow when you wanted to sleep. The problem was this pillow just happened to be comfortable. It seems like it likes you a lot, too. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, looking at Ning, or holding the halberd and cheering with a look of anticipation in his eyes. When Ning-er's cultivation level reached the God the Arch realm, she would use this halberd with all her strength. Who in this world would be her match? The weight of 5,000 kilograms in this girl's hand was like nothing. The power of the Dongwang's sacred body was obvious. Let's go. In the end, Ling Xiao, Han Qingxiu, and Hua Hua's figures disappeared. At the same time, rumors spread all over the western border. The Cold Moon Celestial Palace was destroyed in a breath, and only one of the 8 dynasties was left. The primitive emperor turned into a demon and joined forces with the ocean race to slaughter living beings. In the end, he was destroyed by Lord Ling Xiao and the experts of the Great Qin Empire at the Cold Moon Celestial Mountain. That battle was said to be earth-shattering, and the Lord Ling Xiao seemed to have the help of God. He survived hundreds of battles and killed the great demon with his own strength. He was invincible. Of course, although the rumors were exaggerated, wasn't that always the case? In the end, no one mentioned the name of the Saint sect, and Ling Xiao had become the supreme existence in the hearts of the western border cultivators. Time passed slowly, and half a month passed in the blink of an eye. In this half a month, Ling Xiao and the other 2 wandered around the western border, collecting the remaining dragon veins of the 5 dynasties into their realms. 1. On this day, the realm shook, and a loud dragon roar resounded. The sky that was originally clear suddenly had tribulation lightning descending. Layers of black clouds fell from the sky, and an indescribably terrifying aura shrouded the world. In the void above, a golden array hung horizontally. There were 9 dragons roaring in unison, and the patterns of the great Tao layered endlessly, deriving endless mysteries. Under that array, a white-robed figure stood with his hands behind his back, his eyes clear. Ling Xiao could feel that the divine power contained in this array was enough to trap a high-grade god emperor. Even if the 2 divine envoys of the Saint sect entered the realms now, even if they were not severely injured by the primitive emperor, they would not be able to escape death. It's almost time. Ling Xiao looked at the sky, and a smile suddenly appeared at the corner of his mouth. In the past half a month, although there were undercurrents surging in the western border, there was no news of the Saint sect. Perhaps the Divine Master really did not know about the fall of the divine envoys and the disappearance of the saint. Otherwise, it would not be so calm now. Thinking about it, the Saint sect had ruled the Shenzhou for 1,000 years and suppressed the 4 borders. Even the Divine Master probably did not expect that the Sky Demon would descend in this world. Chapter 611. Saintess Mengyuan. Ling Zhao's figure descended from the sky and landed in the depths of the realm, in front of an ancient forest. Mengyuan's clothes were disheveled, and she was imprisoned by the demonic chains. Her expression was blank and empty. For half a month, Ling Xiao would come every day to discuss the demonic nature with her. Apart from that, there was nothing else. Mengyuan's mind had already collapsed. As long as Ling Xiao removed the demonic chains, the saintess would be able to kill herself without needing to do anything. Wei Guangjing was imprisoned day after day. For Mengyuan, this kind of torture was worse than death. More importantly, the Divine Master was now in closed-door cultivation. The shortest was 10 years, and the longest was 100 years. And given Ling Zhao's methods, what would the Shenzhou province look like in 10 years' time? Hell on earth? Would the stability of the Shenzhou be destroyed by her hands? She wanted to die, but she didn't want to bear this sin. The current Mengyuan was undoubtedly conflicted and in pain. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of a way to break free from the demonic chains in the past few days. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the demonic chains at all. It was obvious that the demonic power had far surpassed her. The 9 heavens' profound body. Mengyuan suddenly felt like she was a joke. She had been in closed-door cultivation for 20 years, studying the past and present, determined to protect the world and kill all demons. Yet now, she had just been born into the world, yet she had already encountered such a calamity. She was imprisoned here and tortured day and night. This kind of humiliation made Mengyuan want to die. Saintess, have you thought it through? Hearing Ling Zhao's voice, Mengyuan instinctively felt a kind of fear. Her originally numb eyes began to reveal endless panic. Ling Xiao, don't think you can get anything out of me. Kill me if you can. Ming Yuan no longer dared to ignore Ling Xiao, because every time she did, she would be humiliated by him. Yes, it's exactly what you think. Aren't you Wei Guangzhen? You see demons as your natural enemy, but now, you're just an ant in my eyes, a fish on the chopping board. The higher the starting point, the more painful it would be to fall. At the end of the day, Meng Yuan was only a woman in her early 20s. The prerequisite for a perfect Dao heart was to have the incomparable identity of the saintess of the sacred sect. In the entire Xingzhou, who dared to ignore the authority of the sacred sect? Only I, Ling Xiao. Where did the Divine Lord go? Why did he leave the saint to you? Ling Xiao walked to Meng Yuan's side and pinched her chin with a cold expression. Even if I die, I will not help you. Ling Xiao, you'll be killed by the Divine Master sooner or later, so I advise you to restrain yourself. Meng Yuan gritted her teeth. She was the saintess of the sacred sect, but her reputation was ruined by this demon. She felt a complicated sense of despair in her heart, especially that uncontrollable joy. It made her feel even more ashamed, angry, and tormented. Restrain myself a little. Saintess Meng Yuan, will the saint sect let me go if I restrain myself? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled, the coldness in his eyes growing stronger. Since its cultivation, what's the difference between slaying demons and slaying immortals? It's just different standpoints. Saintess Meng Yuan, I'm your man now, after all. As long as you submit to me, I promise to return your freedom. Let's slay immortals together. How about that? Nonsense. Demons wreak havoc in the human world, and heaven and earth will not tolerate it. Immortals are merciful and have the world as their long-cherished wish. How can you confuse them? Meng Yuan's face turned pale, and a chill rose in her heart. Slay immortals? This sky demon actually has such wild ambitions to slay immortals as his cultivation, but somehow, Meng Yuan felt that his words were not without reason. He was born as a demon and treated immortals as his enemy. To him, immortals were just training, and the path of slaying was completed. Even if he was merciful and kind, could he really be accepted by the world with his demon body? All of a sudden, Meng Yuan felt a sense of bewilderment. The so-called good, evil, and sin were just different standpoints and different statuses. For example, the demons of Beijiang never dared to step into heaven and earth. Why? Because people cultivated to slay demons and demons. But who said that demons were not dedicated to the Tao and did not commit sins? Is that so? Heaven and earth gave birth to all living things, but cultivation is robbing the power of heaven and earth. What's the difference between immortals and demons? Moreover, the saint controls heaven and earth. Why did they drive the demons away from the north and trap the Sea clan in the south? Since the saintess said, immortals are merciful and equal, why can't they be treated fairly? Ling Xiao smiled faintly, and his tone was full of playfulness. Meng Yuan stood rooted to the ground and did not speak for a long time. Even if the demons surrendered, the saint did not give them equal treatment, right? I don't care. I am the saintess of the saint, and my duty is to slay all demons and demons. Ling Xiao, don't waste your energy. Either you kill me, or I will wait here for the day you are killed. Saintess, you keep saying that demons and demons are demons and demons. Do you know that you also have a trace of demon blood flowing your body? Seeing that Meng Yuan's eyes were trembling, Ling Xiao suddenly spoke. Nonsense. As expected, Meng Yuan's pretty face changed drastically, and she was faintly frightened. Do I have to lie to you? Right now, even your life is in my hands. The calmness on Ling Xiao's face made the fear in Meng Yuan's eyes even more intense. She had heard the Divine Master mention that when she was born, her body was mixed and she was on the verge of death. It was the Divine Master who sealed her vitality and divine soul with his cultivation and nourished it with his spiritual power for more than 200 years. Only then did he remove all the impurities and cast the power of her 9 heavens mystic body. Could it be that the mixed body the Divine Master mentioned was the demon bloodline in her body? But if that's the case, who am I? Saintess Meng Yuan, it doesn't matter whether you tell me or not. I think the Divine Master must be occupied with something important now. Otherwise, why didn't he come to the western border to investigate the death of the divine envoy and the disappearance of the saint? Ling Zhao's tone was calm, but he was actually testing her. With the level of Meng Yuan's divine soul, even if there was a slight fluctuation in her emotions, it would not escape Ling Zhao's senses. You don't have to waste your time. I will not believe you. Meng Yuan's delicate body trembled, but she quickly calmed down. However, this scene could not escape Ling Zhao's eyes. All right, since the saintess does not believe me, I will bring you to see the true face of the sacred sect. Immortals may not be the savior who protects the world. As for demons, they may not be as sinister as you think. After finishing his words, Ling Zhao turned and left. Meng Yuan's emotions had undergone a great change. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before her Tao heart completely collapsed. In the next period of time, Ling Zhao planned to leave this light of righteousness alone. In this way, many of the guesses in her heart would come to nothing. At that time, he only needed to give her a heavy blow to make her willing. Immortal, demon. After Ling Zhao's figure disappeared, Meng Yuan muttered to herself with a miserable expression. Given her current situation, Ling Zhao would not make up a lie to deceive her. However, how could she be a demon? Where did the demon bloodline in her body come from? For a moment, Meng Yuan was disheartened. She suddenly regretted it. She should ask the demon what was going on. Chapter 612. In the Great Qin Imperial Palace, Ling Zhao was dressed in white and looked like an immortal. Beside him, Qin Wushuang's beautiful eyes were filled with sorrow and pity. Wushuang, I know. Don't tell me, and I won't ask. I'll stay here and protect your empire. Qin Wushuang turned around and walked towards the bedroom behind her. 2 lines of tears fell from her pretty face. However, she was not a gentle woman and probably could not stand the lingering feelings before parting. Therefore, she did not want any promises or vows. He had fulfilled his promise to the western border. However, she had never hoped for that grand wedding, because she never wanted to be his burden. Ling Zhao's path was beyond the 9 heavens. Unfortunately, she was not worthy of this peerless young master. She would be happy for nothing. Thus, she would rather be free and unrestrained. Ling Zhao shook his head with a smile and walked into the distance. Behind him, Xiao Beifa took off his armor and was dressed in black. His blood-red, long hair fluttered in the wind, revealing his determination. From today onwards, there was no General Xiao in the western border. He was just a loyal servant. Ning Tiance and the others stood in front of the imperial palace and looked at the young man's figure disappearing into the horizon. After all, Ninger did not want to accompany him. However, he still had unfulfilled loyalty. He would stay in the western border and protect the Great Qin Empire. He would not disappoint the young master. In the southern border, in a hidden mountain, the immortal mountain here was vast and dense with spiritual fog. If not for the wisps of smoke floating in the air, people would mistake it for an immortal holy land. At this moment, in the valley, a young man dressed in hemp clothes and had a pure smile. Even though he couldn't be considered handsome, he still had some elegance to him. Especially that pair of pitch-black and spotless eyes, they revealed a quick-wittedness. The young man was about 20 years old. He was tall and slender. There seemed to be Tao intent circulating around him. Great Master! Chu, you're here. In the hut, a middle-aged man dressed in green smiled gently. Although he did not emit any aura, he somehow made people respect him. He was the head of the 7 devils, the Qin devil, Wenruyu. Great Master, you're looking for me? The young man was called Qin Chu. He was the only disciple of the 6 devils and the hope to change the situation in the Shenzhou. Listen, Qin Chu. These 2 words encompassed the 2 dominant surnames in the cultivation world. If Qin Chu wasn't a heavenly fate cultivator, he wouldn't live up to his name. Book Demon Jian Yunliang stood beside Gu Qin Devil with his hands behind his back. His eyes were filled with reluctance and deep love. 4th Master, Qin Chu bowed to the Book Demon. who nodded and smiled proudly. Clearly, he was very satisfied with this little disciple of his. Third grade divine overlord, sacred body of all things. At the age of 20, there were already 2 signs of flourishing. Back then, the 6 demons searched for heaven's favorites to no avail. After all, to be able to cultivate the 6 paths was extremely difficult for anyone. That day, the 6 devils disguised themselves and drank wine in a remote tribe in the southern border. They accidentally met this young disciple in front of them. At that time, he was only 2 years old and was following behind an old beggar on the streets. However, for some reason, when they saw him, the 6 of them felt a sense of familiarity. Sure enough, the 6 demons brought Qin Shu to a high mountain and asked him about his origins. However, they discovered that this young man actually came from the central border. His family had declined and he had fled here. With the great devil's vision, he could easily sense the peculiarity of this young man's soul. Innate divine king realm. What kind of terrifying talent was this? Therefore, the 6 of them immediately decided to take him as their disciple and teach him diligently. Qin Shu, on the other hand, did not disappoint the 6 of them. Within 5 years, he had broken through to the Paong realm. More importantly, his understanding of arrays, alchemy, swordsmanship, and the Tao of the divine soul had left even the 6 demons in awe. When he was 10 years old, Qin Shu had already understood one of them and became a divine warrior. When he was 15 years old, he awakened the sacred body of all things, which allowed him to understand all kinds of things. If Mingyuan's 9 heaven Xian body was able to deduce the flaws of Tao, then Qin Shu's sacred body was able to understand all kinds of Tao. When he was 20 years old, his divine soul had reached the 7th grade of the divine king realm. His cultivation base had reached the divine overlord realm. In just 1 year, he had reached the 3rd grade of the divine overlord realm. In the eyes of the 6 demons, Qin Shu's talent was unparalleled. Even the heaven's favorites in the central border were far inferior to this little disciple of theirs. Chuer, I called you here today because I have something to tell you. The great demon's smile was gentle, giving off an amiable feeling. However, only those who were born in the same era as him knew how terrifying the Qin demon was under his gentle appearance. One Qin Shao Qin could break the sound of 10,000 years. 1,000 souls dispersing song, 9 fingers reaching the netherworld. Great Master, what's the matter? Qin Shu looked confused. Although the great demon was gentle in the past 20 years, other than urging him to cultivate, he had never spoken to him. Most of the time, the great demon liked to stand in the cottage and stare at an ancient painting on the wall. Qin Shu had once asked the master about the identity of the fairy in the painting, who knew that the great master would fly into a rage and hit him 10 times. Since then, Qin Shu had never dared to speak again. The spirit pool on the Xuanxi Holy Mountain, the sacred ground of the southern border, is about to appear. It's a once-in-a-century event. When the time comes, both the southern border humans and the ocean race will fight for it. At the mention of the ocean race, the great demon's eyes flashed coldly. Although he was a demon, he was not a cruel and bloodthirsty demon. Instead, he was a demon cultivator who pursued freedom. In the eyes of the world, demons were not tolerated. When Ruyu and the others wanted to prove their Tao with demons and tell the world that there was no good or evil between immortals and demons, who said that demons should kill. Unfortunately, before he could fulfill his wish, the divine master of the Saints sect found out. What frightened Ryu even more was that the divine master he saw later was not the woman who had ruined his life with one glance. All these years, when Ryu had pondered for a long time, but still could not figure out the reason. Why did she suddenly disappear? Xuanxi Holy Mountain? Spirit Pool? Qin Shu more or less yearned for the outside world. Which of the 20 young men wasn't passionate and ambitious? However, with Qin Shu's temperament, he could guess the reason why his 6 masters were in seclusion. However, as long as he was careful and did not expose his master's ultimate techniques, it should be fine, right? That's right. Chu, you have cultivated in the mountain village for 20 years and have never come out. Now that the spirit pool has appeared, it is your opportunity. If you can get the opportunity to enter the spirit pool to temper yourself, your cultivation will definitely improve. When Ryu wanted to say something, but stopped. Then, she shook her head and smiled. Moreover, we have taught you all the cultivation methods in the past 20 years. Although you cultivated in the mountain village and stood aloof from worldly affairs, you have more or less lacked tempering. Yes, as the saying goes, it is better to walk 10,000 miles than to read 10,000 books. Now that the Shengzhou is in chaos, there are many demons. You are the bright moon in the sky and should compete with the stars. Do well and show them your elegance. Jian Yunliang nodded and smiled, but the reluctance in his eyes could not be concealed. Chapter 613. But Grandmaster, Fourth Master, I've never left the mountain village. How can I find a Xuanxi, holy mountain? Qin Shu's eyes were filled with excitement, but then he felt a little dejected. At this moment, he was more or less nervous. This world was vast, and there were many experts. According to his second master, although the human race in southern border was weak, there were still a few tribes and ancient sections. Those ancient sects and tribes all had monstrous existences. Compared to them, although Qin Shu had 6 masters, he seemed to lack a background. Of course, with Qin Shu's current vision, he naturally didn't know that his 6 masters were famous experts even in the holy state. Not to mention the ancient sects of southern border. Even the immortal sects of middle border were not worth mentioning in their eyes. And this was the reason why when Ryu wanted him to go out and train, out of protection, the 6 of them had never asked him to leave the mountain village since he was young. The advantage of doing this was that he could cut off karma and focus on the Tao. Qin Shu's current achievements were not only because of his talent, but also because of his clear state of mind. However, as a result, his control over the disputes in this world and the hearts of people seemed weaker. Training in the world was not about one's cultivation realm, but one's Tao heart. Only by experiencing hardship, deception, and even life and death could Qin Shu's Tao be considered perfect. Otherwise, even if he hid in the mountain village and cultivated to the God Emperor realm, he would definitely not be considered an expert. The spiritual pool was said to be the source of southern border's providence. The pool water was filled with Tao runes and had the effect of tempering one's body and comprehending Tao laws. The 100-year opportunity happened to be the opportunity for Qin Shu to be born. At that time, as long as he stood out in that grand event, he would be famous in southern border. And this was the beginning of Qin Shu's immortal path. Sometimes, being the center of attention was not necessarily a bad thing. Only with fame would there be challenges. And when Ryu believed that with Chu Er's talent and cultivation, he would soon realize that he was invincible among his peers. In this way, his invincible state of mind would be forged, and he would slaughter his way to the peak of the world. The holy sect could be destroyed. Do you only know how to eat? Chu Er, how are you going to get to know beauties and confidants like this? Jian Yunliang snorted coldly and glared fiercely at Qin Shu. I called you out this time, not only to broaden your horizons. That spirit pool only appears once every 100 years. Not only the human race, but even the prodigies of the sea race will appear to fight for it. Sea race. Qin Shu narrowed his eyes and instinctively felt a trace of disgust. The southern border was different from the other 4 borders of the Shengzhou continent. There was very little land and many seas. It was said that at the end of the endless sea in the southern border was a border that connected to the starry sky. It was considered a forbidden land for the human clan. Some people even said that a great monster of the sea tribes that had transcended this world was sleeping in the end of the endless sea. The reason why the Oceanids chose to endure was because they were waiting for the sea monster to awaken. Of course, whether the rumors were true or false was another matter. Now that the sacred church was guarding the Shengzhou province, although the Sea clan was rampant, they did not dare to openly become enemies with the human clan. At most, they would provoke them wantonly and kill them in secret. With the strength of the sea race, the sects of the southern border were indeed powerless to contend against them. Therefore, over the years, many human cultivators had died in the hands of the Sea Clan. Chew. In fact, the Sea Clan is not as scary as you think. On the contrary, their hatred of the human clan is because of the suppression of the sacred church. Most of the people in this clan are simple-minded and competitive. But as long as you are stronger than them, their reverence for you is real. Jian Yunliang took a deep look at Qin Chu. The 6 demons had instilled in this young disciple the idea that demons were not necessarily evil, and the sacred church in the eyes of the world was not necessarily righteous. In order to ensure the safety of this young disciple, the 6 demons had never told him about the feud with the Divine Master. But vaguely, Qin Chu had guessed some things. Sure, although the 6 masters have not asked you to go out and gain experience in the past 20 years, you must know that they are doing this for your own good. Only when you're dazzling enough can you be seen by others and make some like-minded friends. Only then will your immortal path not be lonely. Jian Yunliang smiled faintly, his tone somewhat weathered. At this moment, the book demon's eyes were somewhat different. Obviously, the time when the 7 demons roamed the Shenzhou province must have been happy and unrestrained. Humans were always like this. Some things would inadvertently become the past. So this was why we saw a similar back view. A familiar old street had been lost for a long time. As they walked, they scattered and their appearance changed. Like-minded friends? Qin Chu's eyes were somewhat confused, but there was also a hint of anticipation. Since he was young, he had only had 6 masters by his side, and his friends were mostly the wild beasts and flowers in the mountains. Although he didn't understand the feelings of his 6 masters thoroughly, but without a doubt, Qin Chu envied them. They relied on each other in life and death, and shared weal and woe. Can I really meet such a soulmate? Qin Chu was somewhat expectant. My soulmate must be someone who cares about the world, has a tenacious Tao heart, and is upright and kind. Achoo! Somewhere, a white-robed figure sneezed with a trace of confusion on his face. Who is thinking of me? All right, sure. Go say goodbye to your other masters. When Ryu's face didn't change at all, she casually took out a black ancient bell from her pocket and threw it into Qin Chu's hand. This bell can protect the soul. Although there aren't many soul cultivators in the Shenzhou province, you still have to be careful. Unless you have no choice, don't expose your soul technique to avoid being targeted. Remember, don't embarrass me. When you go out, don't mention your sect, but you represent the 6 of us. With that, the great demon turned around and left. From beginning to end, there was no reluctance on his face. Ahem, sure, don't blame him. Your master is like this. He has a gentle smile on his face, but his words can kill. Jian Yunliang shook his head and smiled bitterly. Qin Chu pursed his lips and looked at the ancient bell in his hand. Tears gradually filled his eyes. How could he not know the great demon's temper? Over the years, among the 6 masters, the great master was the strictest to him. But Qin Chu knew that it was because the great master had the highest hopes for him. 4th master, can I ask you a question? Qin Chu looked at the figure walking alone into the distant mountains. He looked at the black robe fluttering in the wind, revealing his loneliness. A trace of sadness suddenly surged in his eyes. Speak. You're about to go out and train. 4th master will tell you whatever you want to know. 4th master, who is the fairy in the painting? This is your great masters. 4th master, don't you need to water the vegetable garden? However, just as Jian Yunliang opened his mouth, the might of a divine soul suddenly came from the distant mountains. It almost overturned the entire cottage. Ahem, this is an adult's matter. Children shouldn't blindly ask. Jian Yunliang's face paled. He took out a golden silk soft armor from his Chinquin bag, and his tone finally carried a trace of disappointment. This Tao armor has accompanied me for 300 years. It was given to me by my master. Now 4th master is giving it to you. When you go out, your dog life is the most important. This Tao armor can withstand an attack from a God Emperor expert and can also conceal your aura. Remember, in front of outsiders, hold back 70% of your strength. Chapter 614. Thank you, 4th master. Qin Chu took the Tao armor and put on. Golden light flowed, and a Tao intent quietly spread out. Go, say goodbye to your other masters. Jian Yunliang smiled faintly, but there was a complicated look in his eyes. Yes, Jian Yunliang didn't turn to look at the ancient scroll hanging on the wall until the young man's figure was far away. On the scroll, a figure in green walked in the mountains. Snow had just fallen, and both sides of the mountain path were silvery white. The green stones were foggy, and the snow was heavy. The woman suddenly turned her head, revealing a peerlessly cold face. Her hair fluttered in the wind, making her look like a fairy. There was a trace of panic in her eyes, and a trace of boredom. The scene froze, and she stood alone in the world. Brother, you still can't forget Missy? Jian Yunliang sighed softly, and a trace of sadness flashed in his eyes. That year, the 7 demons dominated the Xingzhou and began to make a name for themselves. The woman in the painting floated over and swore to slay the demons. At first, the 7 demons were fearless and even looked down on her. How dare a weak woman threaten to protect the common people? But it wasn't until they fought that the 7 demons realized that they were wrong, very wrong. The woman's cultivation was so high that she could freeze thousands of miles with a thought, and she could suppress the sky with a raise of her hand. Even when the 7 demons joined forces, they were defeated and fled. In the end, the great demon, when Ruyu fought alone, and the other 6 demons were lucky enough to escape. But just when the 6 of them thought that the great demon was dead, he fell from the sky covered in frost. That day, snow fell from the sky and covered the 5 borders. It was also that day that a trace of gentleness appeared in the great demon's eyes. Later, the 7 demons learned that the woman was from the holy sect. Slaying demons was their duty. But in the end, she changed her mind and let the 7 demons go. But since then, the woman had disappeared from the Xingzhou. The holy sect had strict rules, and those who allowed demons to cause trouble must be severely punished. So, she was probably punished. To be honest, the 7 demons ended up like this because of Ruyu's obsession. Since then, his temperament changed drastically, and he often drank and killed people. The other 6 demons knew that he wanted to attract the holy sect and that woman. In the end, the divine master was attracted. The fall of the saber demon had completely awakened Ruyu from her obsession. In the past few years, the 6 devils had been living in seclusion, seemingly living a carefree life. However, only the 5 devils knew that their big brother was suffering. He gave up drinking and hid his violin. Every day seemed peaceful, but in the dead of night, there would always be someone standing in front of the painting in a daze. He still hadn't forgotten about the woman in green, and even now, the other devils still didn't know her name. He only knew that her surname was Yi and addressed her as Miss Yi. On the other side, Qin Chu left the cottage and walked into the village to bid farewell to his other masters. What? Chua, you want to go out and train? A slovenly middle-aged man with a messy beard and surging sword insight frowned slightly. The smell of alcohol shot into the sky from his body, and his eyes carried a wisp of a dazed expression. Yes, 5th Master. Grandmaster said that good fortune has appeared in the southern border and asked me to go out and gain experience. Qin Chu bowed. 5th Grandmaster, please drink less in the future. Now that Chuer is gone, there will be no one to hunt for you. Sai, that's good too. Young people should go out and explore. The 5 devils' name was Jian Nanshan. He was a 7th stage divine emperor and a supreme sword cultivator. In terms of realm, he might not be as strong as the great devil Ryu, but in terms of the Tao of killing, he was the strongest among the 7 devils. Chuer, the people outside are cunning. You must be extra careful and not trust others easily. The sword devil casually threw his wine gourd into Qin Chu's hand. The immortal wine in this gourd was made by your 6th Grandmaster. It's comparable to a divine pill. It contains 3,000 sword chi and can kill a divine emperor. Thank you, 5th Grandmaster. Chua, just as the 2 were talking, on the mountain road in the distance, 3 figures walked over one after another. There were 2 men and 1 woman. The men were short and tall, and their auras were vigorous. As for the woman, she was extremely ugly and slovenly. They were the chest devil, the giant devil, and the pill devil. Second Grandmaster, Sixth Grandmaster, Seventh Grandmaster. Qin Shu smiled bitterly and bowed to the people who came. What is Big Brother thinking? Now that the Shangzhou is in chaos, he asked Chu to go out and gain experience. No, I'll go find Big Brother now. The pill devil, Fu Hongye, was originally the successor of a supreme sect. Her alchemy skills were unparalleled, and she was a famous alchemy master in Shangzhou. But later on, the betrayal of her Dao companion caused her character to change greatly. In a single night, Fu Hongye transformed into a pill devil and slaughtered her Dao companion's entire family. Moreover, she sliced that traitor into 1,000 pieces before using his flesh and bones to refine a pill and feed it to the third person. Since then, the pill devil became famous overnight and was reviled by the world. She was the only woman among the 7 devils. In Qin Shu's eyes, she was the 6th Grandmaster who cared about him the most. Sixth sister, Big Brother must have his reasons for doing this. Don't bother him anymore. The sword devil shook his head and smiled bitterly. A swordsman pressed forward with indomitable will. The Tao he believed in was the Tao of killing. What could he achieve by hiding in a mountain village all day? A real man should travel to the ends of the world with his sword, slaying all enemies and becoming the most powerful person in the world. Only his sword heart was immune to all evil. Yes, sixth sister, Chu, is already 20 years old. It's time for me to go out and broaden my horizons. The giant devil, Zhu Dali, tried to persuade her in a muffled voice. His muscles were as stalwart as mountains. Blood and chi rippled around him like an ocean, emitting faint metallic sounds. He was a rare physical cultivator. Chuer, keep this array map. It might be useful at a critical moment. The chess devil by Yishuan took out an array map and put it in Qin Shu's arms. Then, he helped him tidy up his clothes. Okay, since you're going out, don't embarrass your 6 grandmasters. Yes, 2nd grandmaster. With tears in his eyes, Qin Shu knelt on the ground with a thud. Chuer is grateful for the care of my 6 grandmasters. Today, I'll carry out your beliefs and become famous in the world. I'll help my 6 grandmasters fulfill their great wishes as soon as possible. Clang, clang, clang. After 9 kowtows, Qin Shu's forehead turned red. Then, under the reluctant gazes of the others, he turned and walked out of the village. At the peak of the Green Mountain, the 5 devils stood with their hands behind their backs. They looked at the departing figure in silence for a long time. However, at this moment, the 5 of them had a hint of sadness on their faces. They looked like loving fathers who were watching their son go on a long journey. However, their eyes were filled with deep anticipation. After this trip, Qin Shu's name would definitely spread throughout Nanjiang. This was what the 6 devils believed in. Swoosh! Suddenly, a figure flashed through the void and chased after Qin Shu. When Ruyu's eyes narrowed slightly. In the end, she did not stop him. Most of the heavenly talents had protectors behind them. The sword devil's cultivation was the strongest among the 7 devils except for him. With him following, when Ruyu could feel more at ease. Moreover, although Jin Nanshan was a sword cultivator and had an unruly personality, only when Ryu knew that this sworn brother of hers had great ambitions and had long wanted to leave the world. When one reached the end of the Tao, there was no other way. Just now, he realized his state of mind for enlightenment. Experiencing life and death was the fastest way to grow. However, Chuer could not die. Therefore, when he fell into a desperate situation and gained enlightenment in the midst of death, but was powerless to reverse the situation, someone broke the Tao he had walked on and led him further. They were protectors. Chapter 6:15. Big Brother. It was our idea to follow 4th Brother. Don't blame him. On the mountain peak, the chess demon, by Yishuan, looked at everyone and smiled bitterly. The coldness on Ryu's face made him feel uneasy. There will always be prodigies who stand out in every generation. There will also be more prodigies who become the stepping stones of others. I believe that Chu will be the most dazzling one. When Ryu's voice was indifferent, no one could tell whether she was happy or sad. But Big Brother, the divine messenger of the saint, has been in southern border for several months. Isn't it too risky for Chu to come out now? There was a trace of worry on Fu Hongye's ugly face. Sixth sister, you and I are the so-called peerless prodigies on the path of immortality. We have seen countless storms. But compared to Chu, how are we? When Ryu shook her head, she watched as the slender figure finally disappeared from her sight. Then, she turned to look at the 4 demons in front of her. Hearing that, the demons' eyes narrowed. However, they sighed softly in their hearts. That's right. With Chu-Er's talent and cultivation, even a divine king would not be able to defeat him easily, let alone the younger generation. What's more, which of the 7 devils hadn't been tempered through bloody battles? The birth of heaven's mandate illuminated the heavens for eternity. Soul, elixir, sword, array, evolution, and strength. With the 6 types of talent in him, Chu was already invincible among his peers. Even the most dazzling prodigies in southern border would be overshadowed by him. Fourth brother, did you read Chu-Er's fortune? The chess demon turned to look at Jian Yunyang. With the latter's temperament, he was used to reading his fortune before doing anything to determine whether it was good or bad. But this time, he was inexplicably silent. Second brother, I read it. Jian Yunyang's eyes trembled. He looked a little nervous. Is it good or bad? All the demons looked at Jian Yunyang. However, Jian Yunyang smiled bitterly and shook his head. Chu-Er's fate is full of twists and turns. With such a destiny, it is difficult to predict his fate. But I was worried, so I used my lifespan as a medium to take another look. How? Tell us. Chu-Er's journey this time is unpredictable. His life and death are in his hands. Jian Yunyang sighed, and a deep glint seemed to flash in his eyes. In the trigram, he saw a demonic figure standing at the peak of the heavens, exuding an ancient pressure. Below him, there was a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It was an extremely miserable sight. Furthermore, he also saw the corpses of himself and the other devils. However, he couldn't tell if the demonic shadow was Chu-Er or someone else. He also couldn't figure out why they had died. However, as long as Chu-Er stood at the top of the world, they would have no regrets even if they died. What? Why didn't you say so earlier? I'll bring him back right now. Fu Hongye snorted and was about to leave when she was stopped by the great demon. That's enough. Don't worry about him. Chu-Er has grown up. He should walk his own path. Also, none of you are allowed to go out again. With fifth brother following him, no one in the southern border can hurt Chu-Er. If you go out again, you will inevitably expose your whereabouts. Moreover, our old friend is still in the immortal mystic sect. I've already sent a message to him to protect Chu-Er. When Ryu glared at the 4 devils, turned around and walked down the mountain. He believed in his own eyes and the sword in Chu-Er's hand. Once it was cut down, it would be reborn. The reason why he asked Chu-Er to come out was to give him a new identity. Otherwise, the disciples of the 6 devils would eventually bring about a disaster. No matter why the divine messenger of the sacred sect came personally and didn't leave, Chu-Er's departure from the village had nothing to do with him anymore. As long as he could become famous, the sacred sect wouldn't dare to touch him easily. In this way, even if their whereabouts were exposed, it would be another life and death struggle. And Chu would become the most dazzling genius in the southern border, inheriting the will of the 6 devils and becoming invincible in the world. This was enough. In the western border, on a green mountain, Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back, his white robe fluttering. Behind him, Han Qing Qiu and Hua Hua were waiting quietly. There was some doubt between their brows. The young master walked to this point and did not move forward. Dozens of miles ahead was the southern border. Could it be that the young master was waiting for someone? It wasn't until a fishy wind blew between heaven and earth and demonic qi filled the air that Ling Xiao's lips curled up into a smile. He raised his head and looked at the foot of the mountain. He saw four figures walking over slowly. One of them was a monk, a monkey, a dragon, and a chubby person. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed, especially when he looked at the figure. His face suddenly became dull. Even the aura on his body quietly turned cold. There was moonlight flowing around Han Qingqiu's body, as if she was facing a great enemy. It was the first time she saw the young master showing such a surprised expression. At this moment, her gaze also gathered on the four figures. The demon clan? But in the next moment, Ling Zhao's face bloomed with a smile, especially when the four of them walked to the peak of the mountain and bowed to Ling Zhao. A hint of surprise flashed across Han Qingqiu's beautiful eyes. My lord, the people who came were naturally the journey to the West trio that had been ordered to help Ling Zhao find opportunities in the eastern border. It was just that the three of them went, but now there were four of them. More importantly, that white and plump figure looked a little familiar. If it wasn't for the demonic qi on his body, Ling Zhao would have thought that he had met the first person who had transmigrated from another world. Chubby and cute. Isn't this my chubby brother? Damn, if this demon was given a pair of glasses, he would look 90% similar. I recognize you. Just as Ling Zhao was secretly smiling bitterly, the chubby little demon suddenly exclaimed and pointed at Ling Zhao. Slap! Beside him, Yishen fiercely slapped his chubby face. This is my lord! My lord! My lord! I recognize you. But the chubby demon was unmoved, and a bright smile gradually appeared on his face. It's me, my lord. When I went down the mountain to ask for a title, we met before, and that beautiful sister. You are. A figure suddenly flashed across Ling Zhao's mind, wearing green clothes, looking cold and aloof. Then, he remembered who this demon was. It was the little pig head who asked for a title from Yin Qinyan. It's me, my lord. I've been looking for you. The little demon looked excited and knelt in front of Ling Zhao. My lord, I am Bai Jing. This master gave me this name. Hearing this, Huahua immediately covered her mouth and chuckled. Bai Jing, are you sick after eating it? My lord, we have done what you asked us to do. This is what we got from the ruins. Wunye took out a Qinquan bag and respectfully handed it to Ling Zhao. At this time, the third-level demon monk's cultivation had already stepped into the 9th stage of the Divine King realm. He was only one step away from entering the Divine Emperor realm. After being suppressed for hundreds of years, now that he was reborn, it was natural for him to break through. Even Mi Yong and Yi Shun had their own breakthroughs. How did you meet each other? Ling Zhao looked at the four people in front of him with interest. There was a monk, a monkey, a pig, and a dragon. He had a complete set. However, with the ferocity of Mi Yong and the others, it was a miracle that this little pig head could survive from their mouths. First stage of the Divine King realm. Other than that, Ling Zhao did not see anything special about this pig demon. My lord, we met in a ruin. This benefactor Bai Jing has extraordinary talent and can smell the location of spiritual treasures. I think he should be of great use to you. Wunye put his palms together and smiled faintly. Oh, Ling Zhao raised his eyebrows slightly. He did not see that this pig demon had such talent. In that case, wouldn't he have another treasure-hunting pig by his side? Wonderful. You worked hard. There are no more experts in the western border. Go and collect the protection fees from those sects and factions. At the same time, find the ruins and fortunes hidden in the mountains. Remember, don't touch them. Ling Zhao smiled faintly. Wunye and the others immediately bowed and headed down the mountain. This group's mission was to be on the road. Moreover, the Divine Master's whereabouts were unknown. Ling Zhao had to be careful. Mi Yong and Wunye were demons, and Yi Shun was a flood dragon. Where did flood dragons live? In the sea, of course. In that case, it was true that there were demons and sea demons traveling together in the western border. If the Divine Master sensed something, he would definitely enter the western border to look for Meng Yuan and the others. At that time, with the four of them covering him, Ling Zhao would have some time to react. Only when the four of them were far away did Ling Zhao put away the cosmos bag in his hand and turned to look at the mountains in the distance. In the southern border, apart from the sea, there were only mountains. Such a terrain was suitable for those demons and crooked cultivators to hide. However, he did not know how ambitious the 6 great demons were now. Seniors, after hiding for so long, shouldn't they come out to exercise their muscles and bones? According to the memory in Partridge Lee Soul C, Ling Xiao already knew that the divine messenger in the southern border was the first divine messenger of the Saint sect. His name was Dugi Yunjin. This person's cultivation had reached level 9 100 years ago. He was one of the 3 level 9 experts of the Saint sect. It would be difficult for Ling Xiao to kill Xiao Chan with just the strength he had. Moreover, the first divine messenger had always been mysterious. He had never shown his face to others. Even Partridge Lee only knew his name and had never seen him. However, it was okay. Wasn't there still the Sea Tribe and the 6 great demons in the southern border? As for the price they would pay, what did it have to do with him? As long as he could destroy the Saint sect and find out the secret of this world, even if the world died, it would not be a sin to Ling Xiao. Even the heavens could be slaughtered, let alone the world. However, to Ling Xiao's disappointment, the 4th divine messenger did not seem to know much about the past of the divine master. He did not know much about the successor of the sky demon who had wreaked havoc in the Shenzhou and the previous divine master. His duty was only to obey the divine master's orders and kill demons and evil. He would not care much about the affairs of the Saint sect. In other words, the 4 divine messengers were just the sharp blades of the divine master. No matter who the divine master was, it had nothing to do with them. The only thing that Ling Xiao guessed was that the previous divine master, who was called Lord Yi by the experts of the Saint sect, was a woman. She had never appeared in the world and was mysterious. However, the current divine master did not allow the Saint sect to call him by his surname. He was only allowed to be called the divine master. He was a man and was in charge of the world's affairs. Chapter 6:16. Let's go. I heard that something big will happen in southern border soon. Ling Xiao's lips curled into a smile. He reached out and grabbed Han Qingqiu's hand. Then they walked towards the mountain. The secret of the Saint sect gradually surfaced. No matter what kind of shocking change this force had, to Ling Xiao, they were his mortal enemies and could not be changed. The 50 shadow guards had already entered southern border and were now scattered among the various tribes. Although these people's strength was not the best in the Shenzhou, but there was no doubt that it was easy to inquire about the news of southern border. According to the news sent back by the shadow guards, the sacred land of southern border, Xianxi Holy Mountain, had a heavenly lake that was about to appear. It was said that this heavenly lake had a mysterious origin and had existed since ancient times. The lake water was full of Tao, and one could comprehend the Tao by touching it. Although such a rumor was more or less watered down, but a fortune that could attract even the Sea Clan's prodigies would definitely not be simple. What's more, where prodigies gathered, there would be leaks. Ling Xiao had never expected that the cultivators of the Southern Territory would send such a great congratulatory gift to him as soon as he arrived at the Southern Territory. Everyone in Southern Border, you are so generous. Young master, where are we going now? Han Qingqiu stood beside Ling Xiao. Her face was no longer as cold as before and had a hint of gentleness. Cold Moon Divine Palace was destroyed in a breath. If Ling Xiao did not make a move, she might not be Ren Yu Ying's opponent, even if she waited another 50 years. Originally, Han Qingqiu had transformed into a human to avenge Yu Luyan. Now, it seemed that her wish had been fulfilled. Young master, you are rare. Sacred land of southern border, Xianxi Holy Mountain. Ling Xiao smiled and reached out to hold Han Qingqiu's slender waist. Hua! Roar! A loud dragon roar resounded through the sky. The rolling demonic aura turned into black clouds and covered the sky. Now in the land of southern border, the Sea Clan was arrogant. Therefore, as a demon, Hua did not need to hide her aura. She directly released a wisp of dragon power to intimidate heaven and earth. And Ling Xiao's face also surged with a wisp of immortal light, covering his appearance. Previously, the first divine emissary, Guru Yunjin, had sent a message saying that he would go to the depths of the sea alone to search for the traces of the demon. They probably wouldn't appear in human territory in the near future. This gave Ling Xiao some time to prepare. The 6 demons were not easy to find, but Ling Xiao had learned from the sword demon's memories that the 7th demon's ambition was to overthrow the holy church and return true freedom to the world. Since they weren't strong enough, they would have to find another way out. Teaching disciples seemed to be the simplest and most direct way. However, he did not know if he would encounter the successor of the 6 demons, a peerless genius, on this trip to the Xuanxi Holy Mountain. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. During these 3 days, the Southern Territory gradually became more and more lively. All the geniuses walked out of their clans and headed toward the Xuanxi Holy Mountain in the center of the southern border. The appearance of the heavenly pool was an opportunity that no one could miss out on. Moreover, the marine race was rampant and tyrannical. Moreover, the competition for the 10 places to enter the heavenly lake was a fair competition between the human and demon clans. It was a good opportunity to teach the sea tribe a lesson. A young man had to make a name for himself and show his ambition. In layman's terms, what was the point of cultivating if not a show-off? At the same time, rumors spread among the various clans of the southern border. It was said that the saint of the Holy Church would descend on the southern border soon. In this way, the battle for the heavenly lake was undoubtedly more interesting. To be honest, not many people in the Central Territory knew about the saint's identity, let alone the southern border. The 8 clans were the orthodox human race of the southern border and were controlled by the Holy Church. Therefore, the geniuses of the southern border were probably not only here to fight for the opportunity, but also to be able to admire the saint's appearance. It was also a great blessing in life. Moreover, it was said that the saint had come to the southern border not only for the opportunity to enter the heavenly lake. It was said that a great demon had descended and colluded with the marine race to kill millions of living beings in the western border. As the saint of the Holy Church, he naturally had the obligation to track down the demon's tracks. Of course, this news was intentionally spread by the secret guards. Otherwise, even if Ling Xiao had the divine token, wouldn't it be awkward if no one knew him when he arrived at the Xuanxi Holy Mountain? Grandeur, do you understand? I, Ling Xiao, am a #1 villain in the world. Wherever I go, I should be respected and watched by everyone, until the holy mountain towered in front of him. The boundless will covered heaven and earth. Above the holy mountain, tens of thousands of rays of light shot into the sky and evolved into a boundless avatar. Wisps of spirit chi connected to form a sea, as if the Milky Way was hanging upside down and falling from the sky. In the clear sky and bright sun, there were red-crowned cranes soaring and strange beasts flapping their wings. It was a scene of immortals. This was where the providence of the entire southern border was located. It was also where the celestial mystic sect, the only force in the southern border that was above the 8 clans, was located. The sect master of this sect was originally a saint revered by the 8 clans. He was well-versed in divination and was good at divination. Back then, the Holy Church had unified the 5 territories and pushed him to the throne of the #1 person in the southern border. On the surface, it was to respect the 8 clans, but secretly, controlling one person was much easier than controlling the 8 clans. However, the sect master of the celestial mystic sect was indifferent. Although he had established the sect, he had been in seclusion all year round and ignored the secular world. Therefore, although the celestial mystic sect had 7 peaks and 7 branches, its disciples were not flourishing. At the same time, Ling Xiao was standing below the holy mountain. Looking at the clouds above his head, the corner of his lips curled up into a smile. At the end of his vision, a winding ancient path led to the top of the mountain. On the ancient path, countless young disciples and followers were walking slowly. None of them dared to cross the path. "Let's go up too." Ling Xiao smiled faintly. He stepped out, and his entire body turned into a ray of light. Carrying Han Qingqiu, he headed straight to the top of the mountain. Buzz! An ear-piercing, buzzing sound resounded. All the southern border heaven's favorites looked at the spiritual shadow in the sky in shock. Their eyes were filled with fear. The celestial mystic sect had its own rules. On the holy mountain, no one was allowed to fly in order to avoid disturbing the gods. Even if the leaders of the 8 clans were here, no one would dare to break the rules. Who was it that had the guts to break the iron rule of the celestial mystic sect? Especially now, Ling Zhao's posture of carrying a girl in his arms was even more ostentatious. However, strangely, when everyone saw the young man in a starry robe with a face covered by clouds, they did not feel angry at all. Instead, they felt an indescribable sense of respect. Although there was no aura emitting from his body, he had unknowingly merged with the heaven and earth. Even the beauty in his arms had a heavenly aura and an ethereal temperament. There were a few decent girls in the southern border. However, compared to this woman in white, they were somewhat lacking in temperament. An elegant young master and a peerless beauty. Could it be that these two people who looked like immortal companions were the gods of this mountain? Otherwise, how could mere mortals have such an aura of immortality? F***CK. This is the holy mountain of the southern border, Xianxi Holy Mountain. In front of the mountain path, a young man in linen clothes descended from the sky. He stopped and looked up at the sky. His eyes flashed with joy. This time, I will let the entire southern border know my name. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Shu looked at the people on the mountain path in surprise. There was some confusion between his brows. Are these people all fools? Cultivators of our generation. Riding on clouds is a common occurrence. Why do we need to climb the mountain path? We could just fly up. Look, that young master is very smart. He can clearly finish something in one breath. Why waste time on a mountain path? The beauty in the young master's arms is the heavenly genius that the masters mentioned, right? That kind of beauty is truly my fortune to be able to obtain her. I wonder if I can find the like-minded confidant and beauty that the masters mentioned this time. Qin Shu's eyes were filled with yearning. Spiritual light surged around his body. However, just as his figure rose into the air and was about to fly towards the mountain peak, a genius beside him suddenly shouted angrily, "How dare you? Where did this country bumpkin come from? How dare you ignore the iron rule of the celestial sect?" Chapter 617. Qin Shu was stunned and turned to look in the direction of the cursing voice. At this moment, in front of the mountain path, several southern border men and women in strange clothes were staring at him coldly. The look in his eyes was terrifying. He was the son of heaven, after all. Wherever he went, he would be despised by others. But don't panic. Of course, these extras were here to give him face. Fellow Taoists, are you talking about me? The spiritual glow on Qin Shu's body dissipated, and he looked at the people in front of him in surprise. What did I do to offend you, fellow Taoists? At this moment, Qin Shu's tone was somewhat pedantic. The term fellow Taoists was often used by older cultivators. But there was nothing he could do. This disciple of the 6 demons had cultivated with 6 old monsters who were more than 300 years old since he was young. He had never interacted with people of the same generation, so it was inevitable that he had a temperament that did not match his age. However, Qin Shu's mind was simple and did not feel that these people were looking down on him, so his tone was still calm. Brother, look at him. He looks like one of the elders in our tribe who is about to enter the ground. Where did this bumpkin come from? Look at his clothes. Could it be that he crawled out of the ground? The immortal mystic ancient sect has a rule that no one is allowed to fly within the range of the immortal mountain. You don't even know this and dare to climb the mountain? At the front, a burly young man dressed in mink, no, some unknown fur, shouted coldly. At this moment, the aura of a 7th-stage divine general spread out from this young man's body, and his blood energy was extremely terrifying. Clearly, he was one of the famous geniuses of the southern region. Can't fly. Qin Shu frowned slightly and looked up at the golden light that had already landed on the mountain peak. His eyes flashed with confusion. He was really confused. But why did that fellow Taoist just now fly up? Hearing this, the expressions of the southern border youths suddenly froze. F*CK. Why'd he go up? Are you blind? That young master had an immortal aura and an imposing appearance. He was wearing a white robe that was obviously a famous brand. It was a peerless Tao artifact, and he did not look like someone from southern border. Such a person was most likely a peerless genius from the middle border of the Shengzhou. It was understandable that he did not know the rules of a mortal mystic sect. Who do you think you are? Dressed in hemp clothes? You don't have any temperament, and your aura is pitifully weak. With one look, I can tell that you are a piece of trash that came from the depths of the mountains. What qualifications do you have to be compared with that peerless young master? Wait a minute. It was rumored that the Saint of the Saint would descend upon Nanjiang in a few days to compete for the right to enter the heavenly lake. Could it be that person just now? Hiss hiss. Suddenly, everyone's faces turned red, appearing very agitated. It was very sudden. It seemed like he had already seen the saint's celestial appearance. Fellow Taoists, please enlighten me. Just as everyone was pondering, Qin Shu suddenly bowed with an extremely sincere attitude. To be honest, he really wasn't trying to provoke them. He was just trying to figure out why the rules changed so much. However, when this scene landed in the eyes of these people, it more or less carried a trace of humiliation. Are you pretending to be stupid and mocking us for being bootlickers? Since you want to know the answer, I'll tell you today. The leading youth in animal skin snorted coldly, his eyes flickering with coldness. I won't bully you. I won't use my spiritual power. If you can withstand one punch from me, I'll tell you the answer. You won't use your spiritual power? Okay, then I won't use my spiritual power either. I'll exchange a punch with you. Qin Shu nodded. This was the sparring that his masters were talking about. However, why was this youth's aura so weak? Could it be that he was also wearing a Tao armor that concealed his aura like him? It seemed to be the case. You won't use your spiritual power either? You'll exchange a punch with me? Hearing this, the youth in animal skin instantly turned livid. Humiliation. This was a blatant humiliation. He didn't expect this useless country bumpkin to be so reckless. He was about to die, yet he still dared to humiliate him verbally? Brother Baihe, he's humiliating you. Beside him, a youth from Nanjiang shouted sternly. How can I not tell that he's humiliating me? Baihe gritted his teeth, shook his head slightly, and stretched his muscles. Little B*** starred. Today I'll let you know the consequences of being arrogant. Boom! Blood instantly surged like an ocean. At this moment, on both sides of the mountain path, countless Nanjiang elites were attracted by the commotion and looked at the two of them. However, when they saw the youth in animal skin, their eyes were filled with surprise. Isn't that Baihe from the Shuyuan tribe? Who is he going to fight with? You don't know? I think it's that thin and weak youth. That youth looks very unfamiliar. He doesn't seem to be from the 8 tribes. Is he an itinerant cultivator? Look at his small body. I'm afraid Baihe can kill him on the spot with one punch. But that's not necessarily true. Didn't you hear that he won't use his spiritual power to exchange blows with Baihe? Maybe he's a hidden expert? Are you kidding me? If he's a hidden expert, then I'm the reincarnation of an immortal. Ha ha! Waves of mocking laughter came from the mountain path. At this moment, a sincere smile appeared on Qin Shu's face. The people outside the mountain village were really happy. They laughed so easily. It must be a pleasant thing to interact with such people, right? Lil B** starred. Remember, the one who will beat you to death today is Baihe from the Shuyuan tribe. With that, Baihe took a step forward, and the blood aura on his body instantly soared into the sky. Although there was no spiritual power around him, his domineering aura still made everyone's hearts tremble. This Baihe was clearly enraged. With his punch, not to mention that thin and weak youth in linen clothes who had no aura, even a divine general would probably be shattered, right? Look, you're scared, silly. Young man, why are you pretending to be cool for no reason? Great, you're even going to lose your life. Looking at the burly figure that appeared in front of him in a flash, a hint of fighting spirit flashed across Qin Shu's eyes. His master was right. Once he walked out of the mountain village, the world would become exciting, and countless challenges would come one after another. Only by stepping through hardships and crushing all enemies could he forge the Tao of invincibility. Thinking of this, Qin Shu's lips curled up into a smile. Although this Baihe was impulsive, he was obviously a low-key and humble person. He must be in his 30s or 40s, right? With 30 to 40 years of cultivation, he must be much higher than me. Otherwise, why would he hide his cultivation and fight me with his physical body? It was obvious that he didn't want to take advantage of me. Such a person couldn't be considered an enemy. He was more like a good big brother who urged me to move forward. A trace of respect arose in Qin Shu's heart for no reason. He clenched one hand into a fist and used only 70% of his strength to smash down on Baihe's fist shadow. His fourth master had said that when fighting with others, he should hold back 30% and only use his full strength when killing the enemy. However, 70% of his strength was probably not enough to defeat this good big brother of the Shiyuan tribe. Boom! The two completely disproportionate fists finally collided in midair. Endless waves of air instantly spread out in all directions, uprooting the ancient trees in the mountains. But in the next moment, a frightening scene appeared. Chapter 6:18. Qin Shu stood rooted to the ground. Looking at the painful and twisted face in front of him, he was puzzled. Too weak. How could Baihe's strength be so weak? He didn't even feel any pain when it hit his hand. Could it be that this good brother was still hiding his strength? Before Qin Shu could figure out the reason, the entire mountain path suddenly fell into a strange silence. Then, everyone was stunned to see Baihe's figure instantly fly backward. He fell for a few feet before crashing to the ground. He didn't get up for a long time. His arm, which had collided with Qin Shu's, was completely bent at a strange angle. It was obvious that Baihe's arm bones were completely shattered by this punch. But how is this possible? Although Baihe wasn't the top prodigy of Southern Border, the cultivation technique of the Shuo Yuan tribe emphasized the cultivation of spirit and body. Even among the younger generation of Southern Border, Baihe's physical body was outstanding. But now many of the Southern Border prodigies whose faces were originally filled with ridicule had a hint of shock in their eyes. One punch had shattered Baihe's arm bones. This kind of enormous strength could be said to be terrifying. Could it be that this youth was a genius in body refinement? No wonder there were no spiritual energy fluctuations on his body. It turned out that he had taken an unorthodox path, although the body refinement technique wasn't lost. However, since ancient times, there were only a handful of human cultivators who had achieved supreme success with their physical bodies. In other words, the human body was inferior to the demon body. Compared to spirit cultivators, this path was much narrower. Even if some sects passed down body refinement techniques, they only treated it as a form of training and not orthodox. Who would have thought that a body refinement monster would appear at the opening of the heavenly lake this time? Brother Baihe. The prodigies of the Shuo Yuan tribe shouted in shock and rushed to Baihe's side. Looking at the latter's pale face and broken arm bones, their faces were filled with fear and shock. Little B asterisk starred. I didn't expect you to hide your cultivation level. That's right. Our Shuo Yuan tribe has no grudge with you. Why are you so ruthless? I think you're just trying to kill Brother Baihe. Qin Shu stood in place in a daze, his expression a little flustered. They actually saw through my concealment of my cultivation. Furthermore, I had clearly only used 70% of my physical strength. How could I have crippled his arm? In the world of cultivation, broken arms and legs could be regenerated. However, this regeneration required time. At present, the Heavenly Pool contest was about to begin. With Baihe suffering such heavy injuries, it was very clear that he had already lost the qualifications to contest. However, I didn't do it on purpose. Who knew he would be so weak? Fellow Taoists, I really didn't do it on purpose. As you can see, I didn't use my full strength at all. Qin Shu's attitude was extremely sincere. But in an instant, the entire mountain path fell silent again. Everyone stared blankly at the youth in linen with complicated expressions on their faces. Suddenly, a cool breeze blew across the immortal mountain. The sky prides of the Origin Division, in particular, widened their eyes and remained silent for a long time. F***CK. It's not that we haven't seen arrogant people before, but isn't this guy too arrogant? He didn't use his full strength? You? Do you mean that if you use your full strength, Brother Baiho will be gone? Brothers, let's attack together and teach this arrogant B***star a lesson. Anger flashed in the eyes of the people from the Origin Division. Their bodies were surrounded by resplendent spiritual light as they surrounded Qin Shu. Why are you so aggressive? Qin Shu stood on the spot, his figure a little lonely. At this moment, he couldn't figure out. It was clearly Baihe who wanted to compete with him, but he lost. Why did this group of people insist that he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth? His masters were right. The outside world was indeed complicated and dangerous. You forced me to do this. Qin Shu lowered his head, his expression completely cold. Spiritual power quietly rippled around his body. Thousands of divine shadows appeared alternately, evolving into boundless phenomena. At this moment, he was also a little flustered. Although his 6 masters often said that his talent was extraordinary and unparalleled. However, facing 7 or 8 southern border sky prides at the same time, even he felt a great deal of pressure. After all, he had never fought them before. He didn't know if he could defeat them. On the peak of the mountain, Ling Xiao stood in the air with his hands behind his back. Just now, when he was about to fall from the sky, he suddenly felt a terrifying fluctuation from the foot of the mountain. Then he saw Baihe's figure fly out, and a leak that was emitting golden light all over entered his sight. 5,000 points of providence, myriad elephant divine body. Very easily, Ling Xiao guessed the youth's background. However, he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he quietly observed the changes in the youth's aura. Prominent sword Dao, alchemy Dao, innate divine strength, and a mysterious soul fluctuation. These rare talents actually appeared in the same person at the same time. Was it possible that this youth didn't have a few hidden masters behind him? The successor of the 6 demons had appeared in the world just like that. Ling Zhao's lips curled up into a smile. This template was a little interesting. So I really am a cultivation monster. Or my 6 masters are super crafty? Sir, on the peak of the mountain, an elder frowned and looked at the white-robed youth standing in the air with a hesitant expression. In the past few days, the sect master had ordered to clean up the mountain path and organize the sect's affairs to prepare for the arrival of the saint. However, let alone the immortal mystic sect, even the elders of the immortal mystic sect didn't know what the saint looked like. But, looking at the youth's immortal aura, the elder of the immortal mystic sect faintly felt, no. He was extremely sure that this youth was most likely the saint. Otherwise, in the entire southern border, who would dare to be so arrogant and challenge the iron rule of the immortal mystic sect? Damn, I didn't expect that I would meet the young lord that all the elders of the immortal mystic sect were looking forward to. Good fortune. This is a good fortune to reach the heavens in a single step. With that thought, the elder spat on his hand, straightened his hair, and was about to kowtow to show his respect. This old man is the elder of the immortal mystic sect, Li Wuyong. Greetings to the saint. The entire immortal mystic sect suddenly quieted down. Then, all the disciples looked at Elder Li, who was kneeling on the ground and didn't get up. Their eyes were filled with doubt. Li Wuyong lowered his head and knelt on the ground, frowning. Damn, could it be that the saint doesn't like this way of greeting? Then should I change it? Li Wuyong raised his head and took out his Qingquan bag. Saint, however, Ling Zhao's figure was nowhere to be seen in the void. Li Wuyong's expression froze, and a hint of awkwardness gradually appeared in his eyes. No. Where did the saint go? At the foot of Xuanxi Mountain, Qin Shu was dressed in linen clothes, and his sword aura soared into the sky. In front of him, several prodigies of the Origin sect had ferocious expressions. They took out their spirit treasures and smashed them towards Qin Shu's head. Ripples appeared in the void, and layers of it collapsed as if it couldn't withstand such an attack. But just as the spirit treasures were about to land on Qin Shu's body, a wisp of sword intent suddenly drifted between heaven and earth. Buzz! An ear-piercing sword hum resounded, and countless rays of light soared into the sky. The sound of the great Tao spread for thousands of miles, and an extremely cold sword intent suddenly descended. Chapter 619. Buzz! The sound of a sword resonated like a dragon's roar. A wisp of sword light tore through the sky and cut the void neatly. There seemed to be a wisp of primordial purple chi circulating within it. It was indescribably mysterious and terrifying. Clang! As the sword light fell, everyone heard a loud sound that sounded like a yellow bell ringing in their ears. Then, they were dumbfounded to see the 7 or 8 spirit treasures flickering with divine light instantly shatter under the sword light. One sword had shattered 8 divine artifacts, and 2 of them were even Tao artifacts. What kind of terrifying sword might was this? What kind of terrifying cultivation was this? Could it be that the expert behind this linen-clothed youth had made a move? To be able to shatter by his arm with a single punch, no one would believe that this youth did not have an expert teaching him. Inexplicably, a hint of regret flashed across the eyes of the prodigies of the Lunar Origin Division. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the void. They saw a white-robed figure standing with his hands behind his back, surrounded by immortal clouds. 100 miles behind him, a boundless phenomenon floated in the sky. There seemed to be divine dragons roaming, immortals bowing their heads, ancient trees towering into the sky, and the sun and moon reversing. It's him! At this moment, people on the mountain path had already begun to recognize the figure in the sky as the young immortal who had landed on the mountain peak. However, why would he protect that linen-clothed youth? Instantly, many people's faces turned solemn. When they looked at Qin Shu again, there was no longer any mockery in their eyes. It's him! Qin Shu also exclaimed in his heart. He raised his head to look at the white-robed figure descending from the sky, his eyes filled with shock. His sword Tao was inherited from the sword demon. Even the divine emperor of the sword Tao, who dominated the Shenzhou continent, was full of praise for Qin Shu's talent. However, at this moment, looking at the 7 spirit treasures that had been neatly broken under his feet, even with Qin Shu's temperament, he felt a chill in his heart. A sword Tao monster. This was the sword Tao monster that his master had mentioned. A swordsman was a gentleman among soldiers. He was obsessed with being undistracted. With one sword strike, the heavens would be broken. Only by pressing forward without any worries would one be unrestrained. According to his 5th master, anyone who could reach the pinnacle of the sword Tao was someone with an empty mind. Otherwise, with a flawed sword heart, he would not be able to shatter this world. It was obvious that the young man in white was such a person. Ling Xiao took a step forward. His body was like a graceful swan, and when his foot landed, it was as if an immortal lotus had bloomed beneath his feet. Almost instantly, he appeared in front of Qin Shu and the others. Many, many thanks, fellow Taoist. At this moment, Qin Shu didn't know why this young man would help him. Furthermore, facing the attack of 7 people, he was already prepared to fight to the death. But who would have thought that this young man would only use one sword to shatter the spiritual light that filled the sky? What's your name? Ling Zhao's face was shrouded in celestial light. Although his appearance could not be seen clearly, there was a hint of celestial beauty and Taoist charm. My name is Qin Shu. Thank you for your help, fellow Taoist. Qin Shu bowed and said sincerely. Suddenly, looking into the young man's deep black eyes, Qin Shu felt that he might have met the like-minded person his master had mentioned. Although Qin Shu was a disciple of the 6 demons, he practiced 6 different types of demonic cultivation methods. However, what he loved the most was still the sword Tao. This was especially so for the peerless sword immortals that his fifth master had told him about, who could slash the heavens and earth with their swords. They were something that he yearned for. Qin Shu also hoped that one day he would be able to have 3 good friends and travel to the ends of the world with his sword. He wanted to experience the scenery of the world and watch the fireworks of the mortal world. Qin Shu. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Under the cover of the celestial light, the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. Listen, this name was so casual. Qin Shu, Xiao Yi, the 4 great cultivation overlords. This Qin Shu took up 2 characters. If you weren't destined, would you be worthy of this casual name? Young master, how should I address you? Qin Shu stood up with a bright and sincere smile on his face. Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao only nodded indifferently and turned to look at the prodigies of the Origin sect. I hate dogs who bully others the most. You don't have to go up the immortal mystic mountain today. Huh. Hearing this, not only by he and the others, but even the other prodigies on the mountain path were stunned. They didn't have to go up? You think you know? The young master in front of him was able to fly up the mountain and appear here, safe and sound. Presumably, his identity must be extremely respected. Just now, some prodigies had already connected him to the legendary saint of the sacred sect. Moreover, looking at Lord Ling Xiao's cultivation and temperament, he must have a great background. Of course, if it was Qin Shu who said these words, he would definitely be mocked and ridiculed. In fact, a few elders of the immortal mystic sect would even come down the mountain and mock him again. At the critical moment, the sword demon hiding behind him waved his sword, shocking the world and instantly slapping everyone in the face. Behind this linen-clothed youth stood an immortal emperor sword cultivator. It was a 6-stage or 7-stage immortal emperor. No, you're wrong. There are 6 people standing behind me. Are you tired of it? I, Ling Xiao, don't need to act cool at all. My every move is natural. Why? Of course, it's because I'm handsome and have a proud temperament. Even immortals would be impressed, let alone these mortals. Whether it was the cultivation world or the secular world, people's hearts were generally the same. Fear the strong and bully the weak. What? The son of destiny was not weak. But most of them liked to pretend to be pigs. What a joke. Who would respect a pig? Of course, it was not that no one would provoke the villain. There were always some unique and eye-catching weirdos in this world. However, if someone dared to provoke them, there was no need to suppress them. They could just kill them. This, young master, just now, Qin Shu wanted to fly up the mountain. We just wanted to teach this little bastard a lesson. It's not appropriate for you to deprive us of the right to go up the mountain like this, right? Why, his face was pale, and his voice was weak. However, as soon as he finished speaking, everyone looked at him with even more playful gazes. Teach Qin Shu, this unruly little bastard, a lesson? Fly up the mountain? Didn't you see that young Master Ling Xiao was also flying up into the sky? Who are you scolding? Oh, don't know the rules? From today onwards, there will be no such rule in the immortal mystic mountain. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently. From now on, your tribe doesn't need to go up the mountain. What? Baihe's expression changed drastically, and beads of sweat flowed down his forehead. If today his Shuo Yuan tribe was deprived of the right to compete for the heavenly lake because of him, then he, Baihe, would be a sinner. Young master, please calm down. We were wrong. Please give us a chance to turn over a new leaf. In the end, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Baihe knelt on the ground with a plop and begged in a deep voice. Ling Xiao's sword strike just now, he felt it extremely vividly. If this sword strike did not hit the numinous treasure, not a single person from his Shuo Yuan tribe would be alive today. He did not feel the slightest bit embarrassed to kneel to such a peerless monster. Hee, brother Baihe, aren't you too spineless? Although I don't know where this Lord Ling Xiao came from, it's too arrogant to decide the rules of the immortal mystic sect like this. Look, the weirdo is here. Chapter 620. Hiss, hiss. Suddenly, gasps could be heard from the Xuanxi mountain path. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and turned to look at a figure in the crowd. His lips curled into a playful smile. According to the plot, the villains should not be mocked. However, there was no lack of extras who liked to show off in this world. Did you notice that they were not mocking the Son of Destiny? They were mocking the person who was in the limelight in a scene. For example, there was a peerless beauty beside him. Her cultivation level was mediocre, but she was doing something shocking. Of course, this person was usually the Son of Destiny and also the main character of the book. What the villains wanted was nothing more than to crush the Son of Destiny and gain the admiration of the beauty and the respect of the world. However, it was a pity that such people were usually dead. However, under normal circumstances, the slightly talented villains would die in a process. In other words, they could live for 3 or more chapters. But now, isn't this Yin Qi from the Taiyuan tribe? Everyone's eyes narrowed as they looked towards the source of the voice. They saw a young man in fur standing in the crowd with a cold smile. A 9th grade divine general without luck. Ling Zhao's eyes flashed with a playful look. You have a problem with that? This is the celestial mystic sect. The Xuanxi Mountain is the sacred mountain in the hearts of the southern border 8 tribes. No matter where you are from or what your identity is, you should respect the faith of the 8 tribes. Yin Qi snorted coldly, especially when he saw the shock in everyone's eyes. He could not help but feel a sense of pride. He could not defeat the young man in white in front of him, but would that stop him from showing off? He did not intend to fight with Ling Xiao. Moreover, the southern border 8 tribes had faith in him. Even if this young man was from the Saint's sect, would he dare to kill him in front of everyone? It was demonic to kill people at will. The high priest has long set a rule that the celestial mountain is not allowed to fly in order to avoid disturbing the gods of the southern border. Young master, you broke the rule as soon as you arrived. Aren't you disrespecting the southern border 8 tribes? Hearing this, many of the southern border geniuses had a complicated look on their faces. Originally, they did not think that Ling Zhao's actions were inappropriate. But now that he heard Yin Qi's words, it seemed to make sense. Moreover, the sacred sect was the leader of the righteous path in Shenzhou. If Ling Xiao was really a chosen, then his words and actions today were indeed a little arrogant. Have you heard of this saying? Ling Xiao smiled faintly and looked at Yin Qi calmly. The latter frowned slightly. He suddenly felt uneasy, but he suppressed it in the blink of an eye. I can't beat you, and I don't intend to fight with you. But does this prevent me from attacking you? As long as I stand out and lead the wave, I can put the blame on you and attract everyone's attention, highlighting my uniqueness and making my presence known. It would also allow more ignorant people to acknowledge me and raise their spirits. Why wouldn't I do it? Anyway, you're from the Saint's sect, you're the righteous saint. You can't kill me. I just want to scold you. I'll scold whoever's the best. What can you do to me? Perhaps in Yin Qi's eyes, Ling Xiao was the mandate of heaven, the light of the righteous path. But he probably never dreamed that the person in front of him was the real villain, a villain who was even more evil than him. What's saying? Yin Qi crossed his arms and tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. His expression was full of arrogance. It was as if the chosen of the sacred sect was not worth mentioning in his eyes. Villains die because they talk too much. Ling Xiao smiled and suddenly stretched out his finger. Unparalleled sword intent broke through the air, not giving Yin Qi any time to react at all, actually cutting him in half from middle. Puchi, fresh blood and internal organs splattered all over the ground. The thick smell of blood instantly filled the entire mountain path. At this moment, everyone's faces were filled with intense fear. Their gazes towards Ling Xiao were no longer just filled with respect. There was also a strong sense of fear. He was killed just like that? What happened to the sacred sect's members being righteous and caring for the common people? Why did he kill someone the moment he attacked? Although Yin Qi's words and actions were offensive, he didn't deserve to die, right? But at this moment, no one dared to say anything. It was obvious that this white-robed man was not as gentle as they thought. Seeing this scene, Ling Xiao's smile deepened. What a joke. What does the sacred sect's reputation have to do with me? I'm here to conquer. All those who are not loyal should end up like this. As for whether the southern border 8 tribes dared to resist, Ling Xiao guessed that they definitely did not dare. Offending the sacred sect because of a tribesman? Is it because I, the divine master, can't hold a sword? Or is the name of the divine envoy useless? This Yin Shi was most likely going to die for his crimes. And this scene in Qin Shu's eyes was not bloody or cruel at all. Instead, it made him feel an inexplicable sense of honor. It was obvious that Ling Xiao's actions were to stand up for him. Or rather, everything that happened today was caused by him. Lord Ling Xiao was questioned, blamed, and killed for no reason. It was all because of him. Inexplicably, Qin Shu felt touched. It turned out that the outside world didn't only have evil people. There were also people like Qin Shu, free and unrestrained, peerless people who lived according to their hearts. It was no wonder that his sword was so sharp. Perhaps in his heart, this so-called righteous path was just a kind of restraint. Only by breaking the restraints and being unrestrained could one be considered truly free. Lord Ling Xiao, I understand you. Beep. The destined son of destiny approves of the villain's actions. Congratulations to the host for plundering 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. Hearing the system notification, the corners of Ling Xiao's lips curled up into a smile. The disciples taught by the 6 great demons were indeed terrifying. In terms of talent, Qin Shu, who had the sacred body of all things, was above Ling Tian and the others. But his 6 masters were all reclusive demons. This was probably the first time this destined son of destiny appeared in the world. However, he couldn't let anyone know who he was. Even his 6 masters couldn't act wantonly against him. Otherwise, if the 6 demons attacked together, who would be able to fight against them in Nanjiang? Of course, with Qin Shu's luck, even if he had a pure heart, he wouldn't die so easily. Moreover, Qin Shu, the disciple of the 6 demons, had the sacred body of all things and had a righteous heart. Meng Yuan, the saintess of the saint, had the 9 heavens mystic body, could break all spells, and took killing demons as her mission. The 2 of them had been reclusive for many years. It was their first time appearing in the world. According to the plot, they were most likely going to meet. Wasn't all of this too coincidental? If they hadn't met Ling Xiao, this pair of Mo Yijing and Mo Yijing would probably have an extremely complicated love and hate relationship. What a pity. The original female lead has been replaced, and the destined son of destiny is too pure. Without the protagonist's halo, how can you fight me? Look at Qin Shu's blank face just now. He probably doesn't even know that he's awesome. You want to use your innocence to defeat me? Ling Xiao sneered in his heart, but his eyes were surprisingly clear. Qin Shu's role was far more than just a leak. The 6 great demons behind him were the ones that Ling Xiao wanted to deal with. The first oracle of the saint was still in Nanjiang. If he didn't kill him here, wouldn't it be a waste of the Divine Master's good intentions of sending him here alone? However, Oracle Dugu was at the 9th stage realm. It would take a lot of effort to kill him. And this was Qin Shu's greatest value. 6 masters, I've been exposed. The Oracle wants to kill me. Help! An earth-shattering battle was already in front of them. Do you have any objections? Ling Xiao turned to look at by he and the others, only to see them bow in unison. Thank you for sparing our lives, young master. Then, under the complicated gazes of the Nanjiang geniuses, he turned around and rushed down the mountain. Young master is righteous and spare my life. If they had any objections, wouldn't they be asking for a yard after taking an inch? People should know how to be content and grateful. Chapter 621. Thank you, young master. Today, Qin Shu has caused you trouble. If you need my help in the future, please let me know. Qin Shu walked to Ling Xiao and bowed deeply. No need. If it was anyone else, I wouldn't sit by and do nothing. Ling Xiao said indifferently. He raised his head and looked at the sky in the distance. Then, he turned and flew toward the mountain peak. Looking at the departing figure, the surrounding geniuses had a complicated look in their eyes. The commotion on the mountain path could not be hidden from the emperor gods of the celestial mystic sect. However, until now, no one from the celestial mystic sect had arrived. This was enough to explain many things. Ling Xiao, young master, the current me may not be good enough for you. However, I'll make sure you remember my name in this battle for the heavenly lake. I'll never forget what you've done for me today. Qin Chu raised his head and looked at the figure walking among the clouds. His eyes flashed with determination. This was the first person he had met who had helped him since he entered the world. Moreover, this person was a peerless sword cultivator. Only such a well-behaved and carefree young man was worthy of being his confidant. Meeting was just the beginning. Their story had just begun. It wasn't until Qin Chu started walking toward the peak of the mountain that a tall, middle-aged man wearing the same white robe appeared in front of the forest in the distance. At this moment, the sword demon no longer had the smell of alcohol on him. Even the beard on his face had been shaved, revealing an old but handsome face. His gaze was deep and cold, especially when he looked at the figure in the sky. There was a hint of pity in his eyes. The saint of the saint? He was indeed a talented young man with a clear mind. In fact, for the first time in 20 years, Jin Nanshan felt that there was someone more talented than Qin Chu among his peers. Others could not feel the sword intent, but he could see it clearly. Great mastery of the sword Dao. A young man with great mastery of the sword Dao was definitely unparalleled in the entire Xingzhou. Unfortunately, he was a member of the Saint. However, for some reason, other than pity, the sword demon was also looking forward to it. Although the divine master was domineering and forced the 6 demons to a dead end. However, Missy was also a member of the sacred religion, but she was not pedantic and unreasonable. A person who had cultivated the sword Dao to such a level proved that this white-robed youth did not have any evil intentions. Regardless of friend or foe, he and Chu would be a pair of peerless geniuses. As for who would be the main character of this world in the end, that would depend on their own luck and fortune. In this era of great strife, having such an old enemy was not a misfortune, but a great fortune. Chu a swordsman, you have to face difficulties head-on. You have to know when to advance. Hold your sword and clash with him. Chu the rest of the journey is up to you. The sword demon turned around and flew away. Along the way, he followed Qin Chu and protected him secretly. However, there were many experts in the immortal mystic ancient sect. Even the sect master of the immortal mystic ancient sect caused him to feel fear. However, if he remembered correctly, the Southern Divine Emperor that his big brother had saved back then was an elder of this sect, wasn't he? With Big Brother's cautiousness, it was impossible for him not to set up a trap when Chu was born. With his protection, Chu would definitely be safe in the immortal mystic sect. At the top of the immortal mystic mountain, flowing light overflowed and covered by immortal clouds. At this moment, on the square in front of the main hall, countless disciples were standing in an orderly manner. Even the many elders of the sect were standing on the spot with solemn expressions, as if they were waiting for someone. In front of everyone, there was an old man wearing a long black robe. His hair was covered with fine hair, and he held a peachwood walking stick in his hand. He seemed out of place. This person was the sect master of the immortal mystic sect, the sage revered by the 8 tribes, Hellion Shan. Speaking of sect master Hellion, he was also a person who stood at the peak of the Southern Divine Territory. There were many barbarian tribes in the Southern Divine Territory. The 8 tribes each had their own way of governing, and each of them had their own subordinates. However, this place was originally desolate and bordered the boundless sea domain. It was extremely chaotic. When Sect Master Hellion was born, the various tribes of the Southern Divine Territory had already been fighting for 100 years. They also had to resist the massacre of the sea race. Hellion Shan walked the world alone with his walking stick. He did not use his cultivation to suppress the 8 tribes. Instead, he patiently persuaded them to cultivate weapons, farm, and imparted cultivation techniques to help the people of the 8 tribes cultivate and prolong their lives. Of course, those who created the river would definitely suffer, and Hellion Mountain was no exception. However, he never got angry or regretted it. 100 years passed like a day. Dressed in a black robe and holding a peachwood branch, he traveled through the southern divine territory. Gradually, people started to believe in him as a sage. However, what truly made him respected was that day when the sea monarch led the experts of the sea race to conquer the 8 tribes and unify the southern divine territory. The sea monarch's cultivation had already reached the heavens. No one in the 8 tribes dared to fight him. It was Sect Master Hellion again. With a peachwood branch, he intimidated everyone. Only then did the world realize that his cultivation had already reached the peak of perfection. If he wanted the 8 tribes to submit, he did not need to persuade them. He could just crush them with his strength. No one in the southern divine territory dared to resist. However, he had chosen the most difficult path and endured the most vicious words in the world. The reincarnation of a sage cared about the people. From then on, the 8 tribes revered him as a god. Hellion Shan wanted to live in seclusion. However, the Divine Master summoned him to establish the immortal mystic ancient sect to protect the people of the southern divine territory. At this moment, Hellion Shan's expression was extremely calm. However, his old eyes revealed an unfathomable depth. He had already sensed the chaos at the foot of the mountain. It seemed that the saint was kind in his heart. However, he was not foolishly kind. Instead, he was a person who killed decisively. Buzz! Celestial clouds suddenly spread across the sky. A white-robed figure walked over with his hands behind his back. Beside him, 2 beautiful girls followed closely behind. The sound of the Tao spread across the sky. Auspicious clouds gathered like a celestial miracle. The young man only glanced at everyone with his clear eyes. Then, he descended from the sky and stood in front of Hellion Shan. Hellion Shan, sect master of the immortal mystic ancient sect, greets the saint. At this moment, there was no need for Ling Xiao to show the divine badge. His aura alone was enough to make people guess his identity. Sect master, why are you so sure that I am a saint? Ling Xiao looked at the old man in front of him meaningfully. He was an 8th-grade divine emperor with the power of will. There was an ethereal and mysterious aura circulating around his body. It was obvious that this person was good at divination. He could tell the position of the stars and knew the fate of the heavens. Today, I observed the celestial phenomenon. There is a purple aura rising in the west. There must be a noble person here. The saint is surrounded by auspicious clouds and has a natural Tao. You must be a dragon among men. Other than the saint, I can't think of anyone else who has such good luck. Hellion Shan shook his head and smiled bitterly. Aha, sect master, you are flattering me. The corners of Ling Xiao's mouth curled up into a smile. Especially now that the old sect leader had a head full of dirty braids. He looked even more unique and eloquent. Why? Do you want to be a rapper star too? However, if the old sect master were to find out that the person he was worshipping was a true demon, would he doubt his own professionalism? Chapter 622. Young Master, please come in for chat. Hellion Shan waved his hand and turned around to lead the way. Ling Xiao's gaze swept past the elders and disciples of the immortal sections. However, he was slightly disappointed that there wasn't even a single person of destiny in this huge immortal sect. Was this reasonable? However, just as Ling Xiao arrived in front of the group of celestial sect elders, his eyes quietly narrowed. Among the elders, there was a white-haired old man in black robes who was looking past him at the crowd in the distance. Ling Xiao seemed to have sensed something and turned around to see Qin Chu standing in the crowd and looking at him with a smile. Instantly, Ling Xiao had a guess in his heart. He could see the providence on these children of destiny, but these natives naturally couldn't see it. This white-haired old man's cultivation was already at the 7th stage of the divine emperor realm. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have noticed Qin Chu, who looked ordinary and had concealed his aura. However, he actually ignored him and looked at the youth in the crowd. What did this mean? It meant that he knew Qin Chu. What else could it mean? The children of destiny were indeed easily dazzling, but that was only after they had been suppressed and ridiculed. How could a youth who had never been born and didn't even know that he was awesome be seen through with one glance? There was something fishy about this elder. Generally speaking, a great demon's character would definitely be bloodthirsty, but he would definitely emphasize friendship. This was also the reason why people believed in immortals and gods, but readers preferred the demon path. They were decisive in killing and were enemies with the world, but they were loyal and righteous. They were lonely and carefree. Anyone who became a demon had karma, regardless of love or hate. In today's mortal world, everyone is depressed, so we probably admire the same kind of people. Strong and cold. Because the more you smile, the less people will care about your seriousness. Elder, Ling Xiao stopped and looked at the black-robed elder in front of him with a faint smile. This is the great elder of the immortal mystic sect, Feng Yuanyang. Helian Shan was stunned. He turned around with a look of confusion in his eyes. Clearly, he didn't understand why Ling Xiao would ask about Elder Feng. "Oh, Elder, are you not from the southern border?" Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, and before Feng Yuanyang could react, he had already walked into the hall. Regardless of what kind of karma this Elder Feng had with the 6 demons, it seemed that he was quite useful. Currently, rumors were spreading all over the southern border that a demon had joined forces with the sea race to bring chaos to the world. Although this matter had nothing to do with the 6 devils, but if I say it's related, it's definitely related. As for Qin Shu, as the disciple of the 6 demons, it wouldn't be too much for me to call him a descendant of the Devil Tao, right? On top of the mountain, Qin Shu looked at the figure surrounded by people, and his fists gradually clenched. So Lord Ling Xiao is actually the holy son of the sacred sect. Naturally, the 6 devils had mentioned this faction a lot. Although Qin Shu's cultivation technique wasn't a real demonic technique, it was still a demonic technique, similar to the universal demonic Tao sect. What the 6 devils believed in was freedom and freedom. Their techniques and abilities were also unconventional. As for the sacred sect, it was the head of the Shengzhou Orthodox Tao and had always been responsible for killing demons. Therefore, before leaving, his 6 masters had repeatedly warned him not to expose his identity as a demon disciple. Originally, Qin Shu disdained the hypocrites of the sacred sect, but after seeing Ling Xiao, he felt that they couldn't be lumped together. At the very least, the Tao this young master believed in was very unruly. It should be Chuer. Feng Yuanyang ignored Ling Xiao. In his opinion, the Holy Son probably saw that he didn't look like someone from the southern border, so he asked. A few days ago, he had received a message from Wenruyu telling him that Chuer would be coming to the Xuanxi Divine Mountain soon to compete for the fortune in the Heavenly Lake. She also attached a portrait of Qin Shu and asked him to take care of her. Feng Yuanyang was truly in awe of the great demon Wenruyu. When he first entered the southern border, he offended the sea race and happened to meet the 6 devils who were traveling the world. If the 6 of them hadn't joined forces and defeated the sea race masters, Feng Yuanyang would have died in the hands of the demons. Compared to the judgment of the world, he trusted his own senses more. The 7 of them traveled together in the southern border for several years. Feng Yuanyang was convinced by the moral conduct of the 6 devils and almost followed them to live in seclusion. However, in the end, he joined the immortal sect to repay their kindness. It was only to inquire about the movements of the sacred sect so that the 6 devils could deal with them. Dozens of years passed in the blink of an eye. He was now the great elder of the immortal mystic sect, and the disciples of the 6 devils had come out to experience the world. Although he wasn't a master, he was very happy. Chuer, don't worry. I will help you fight for the fortune and let you stand out in the southern border. As the saying goes, the higher the expectations, the greater the disappointment. On a secluded mountain peak at the back of the immortal mystic mountain, compared to the main peak of the immortal mystic mountain, this place was much quieter. Clouds and mist curled in spirals, and a mountain forest formed sea. It was even more serene. At this moment, in front of the main hall in the peak, a young girl in black was lying on a bamboo chair. Her face was covered with an ancient book as she lazily basked in the sun. However, what was slightly strange was that this young girl was actually wearing a pair of silver-threaded gloves on her jade-like hands. It looked rather strange. "Senior Sister Rouge, I'm back." Suddenly, a hearty laugh came from afar, scaring the young girl so much that her delicate body trembled. She instinctively circulated her spiritual energy and directly jumped 10 feet away. In her hand, a spirit talisman flickered with golden radiance, revealing endless mysteries. "If you're back, then so be it. What are you shouting about? You scared me." The young girl frowned slightly with a trace of anger. At this moment, her face was covered with a thin layer of gauze. One could vaguely see her peerlessly beautiful face. Her name was Phoenix Rouge, and she was the first disciple of the immortal mystic sect's seventh peak. She was 20 years old, but there wasn't much spiritual energy fluctuation on her body. Her pair of beautiful eyes were bright and deep like the stars, ethereal and divine. Half of her pitch-black hair was casually draped behind her head, while the other half was tied into a thin braid. It had a somewhat exotic charm. Only her temperament was inexplicably lonely. It was as if she didn't fit in with this world. "Senior Sister, you're the first disciple of the seventh peak. Why are you always so timid?" On the mountain path, a young man in white walked over. His delicate and handsome face was slightly immature, and his aura was also weak. He was the type that wouldn't attract a second glance in a crowd. "What do you know? I'm timid? How many times have I told you? The path of cultivation is extremely dangerous. This is called being cautious. Do you understand being cautious?" Phoenix Rouge glared fiercely at the young man. "Have you finished your homework? Master isn't here, so you're not allowed to slack off. I've been on the mountain for 5 years. A while ago, I even followed my senior brothers down the mountain to eliminate demons. Now that I've returned to the sect, other than chopping firewood, I've been carrying water. Senior Sister, when are you going to teach me some powerful techniques?" The young man's face lit up with a naive look. He took out a spirit fruit from his chest and handed it to Phoenix Rouge. "I just picked it. I ate one. It's sweet. Senior Sister, try it." "Just picked it? Do you know what spirit fruit this is? You dare to eat it? How many times have I told you?" "Junior brother Qing Shan, don't pick the wild flowers and fruits in the wild. They might be poisonous." Phoenix Rouge shook her head. Her expression suddenly turned serious. "Junior brother, you must remember to be cautious. Cautious. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died." Chapter 6:23. Senior Sister, you've been cultivating in the sect for 10 years. Why didn't my fellow disciples recognize you when I mentioned you? The white-robed youth's eyes were filled with confusion. His senior sister had always been mysterious. He had never seen her cultivate. All she did every day was study some ancient books, say some strange things, and do some strange things. Back when he was brought to the mountain by his master, he directly asked senior sister to teach him. To be honest, Chun Shan still did not know what cultivation level his master was at. That was because it seemed that his master would have a very strange illness whenever he saw senior sister. He would feel uncomfortable all over. Therefore, his master had either gone into seclusion or left the mountain to travel these years. He had practically let the two of them go. "Go beat yourself up 20 times. Phoenix Rouge looked coldly at Qin Shan. The latter's face immediately flashed with grievance. "Senior sister, what did I do wrong again? I've taught you for 5 years, but you still haven't understood the true essence of cultivation." I'll remember. Chun Shan closed his eyes and shook his head, looking like a teacher. The true essence of the path to immortality. First, don't involve karma. If you have nothing to do, don't wander around and try not to interact with others. Second, when you fight with others, hold back 30% of your strength. At the crucial moment, use your trump card and strike with all your strength. Kill with one strike. After you fight, don't pay attention to morality. Third, if you can't win, run. If you have companions, ask them to hold you back for a while. It's better to die than me. You're quite proficient at reciting. But who allowed you to leave the mountain? While I was refining medicine in seclusion, you actually followed others down the mountain to eliminate demons. Have you seen a demon? Feng Rouge glared fiercely at the young man. When Master brought you up the mountain, I originally refused. You've been obedient all these years, but if there's a next time, I'll expel you and Master from the sect. Hee hee. Senior sister, I don't want to do this either. However, the sect master said that every peak must send a disciple to accompany them. Also, actually, she's not a devil. We just happened to meet her in the 10,000 Ghost Mountain. Senior sister, you should go out and walk around more. Sometimes, this world is not as scary as you think it is. Chen Qingshan's eyes blurred. Even the corners of his mouth curled up into an inexplicable smile. You're pissing me off. Looks like you didn't listen to a single word I said to you. Let me tell you, Chen Qingshan, with your temperament, you won't be able to live to become a divine champion. The path to immortality is vast. Since the prehistoric times, how many shocking and brilliant figures have transformed into bones and dust? Why don't you take a look at yourself in the mirror? Your natural talent is mediocre, and if it wasn't for me strictly disciplining you these past few years, you'd probably have been cheated to death by others a long time ago. Phoenix Rouge's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. She had a look of disappointment on her face, but in the next instant, a hint of suspicion appeared on her face. Wait, her? Thousand Ghost Mountain? Qingshan, tell me honestly, are you in love with him? Dating? Chen Qingshan was taken aback. It was starting again. Senior sister began to speak some strange nonsense again. All these years, he had often heard his senior sister talking to herself about the sin she had committed in her previous life. She shouldn't have been drinking and dancing all night, every day. Now, she had shaken herself to death. Dancing was fun for a while, but he kept dancing all the way to the crematorium. Not only did he not understand these words, but even his master, who had lived for more than 300 years, had never heard of these words before. Therefore, both master and disciple felt that their senior sister was mentally ill. However, it just so happened that she also had extremely high comprehension ability, especially in escape techniques and the Tao of poison. In any case, they were all techniques that could be used against others, and they had almost reached the point where they were self-taught. Their master once sighed with deep meaning. In terms of natural talent, your senior sister was unparalleled in all of history. It was just that her temperament was strange. However, if she was placed in the same battlefield as all the geniuses of the southern border, she would definitely be the one to survive in the end. That is, since you left the mountain this time, do you have a girl you like? Phoenix Rouge's expression became more and more suspicious. She sized up Chen Qingshan in front of her. In particular, the flicker of shyness in this little junior brother's eyes made her heart skip a beat. Despite all my precautions, you still did this to me. Phoenix Rouge fell onto the bamboo chair with a thump. Her beautiful eyes surged with a cold light that made Chen Qingshan fearful. Chen Qingshan, uncouth name, ugly appearance, poor talent, orphan. Phoenix Rouge's pretty face froze. She stood up from the bamboo chair again and turned around to walk towards the main hall behind her. This Chen Qingshan couldn't be the destined person of this world, right? He hadn't left the mountain for 5 years. He just casually went down a mountain to kill a demon and triggered a love mission. Wasn't this what the books often said about being blessed by Providence? Although Phoenix Rouge didn't usually read novels, now, this promotion was really too awesome. She casually opened a web page, decided there would be some very attractive small pictures below. But when she clicked on it, she would realize that it was actually a serious novel. Wasn't that infuriating? Therefore, after being fooled so many times, Phoenix Rouge had also read a few of them. However, she never dreamed that one day, her soul would transmigrate to a different world and come to this terrifying world. Did you think that all transmigrators would roar to the sky the moment they transmigrated, "The heavens didn't forsake me"? In this life, I must have the sky have gone, the earth have gone, and the air have gone. It was impossible. Phoenix Rouge cried for an entire day. In the end, What supported her to accept reality was that this world seemed to have many handsome young men. Otherwise, why would the random supporting characters in the novel all have celestial appearances? What was the purpose of dancing? To shake a girl? Of course not. It was to shake a good-looking young man. But in the end, Phoenix Rouge was still disappointed. Firstly, the young men in this world were rustic and boring. She didn't need to tease them, and they would be attracted by her beauty. And those who were slightly more handsome either had their hearts set on gone or were stallions. They were extremely disgusting. Secondly, although she had transmigrated, she had inexplicably transmigrated into the body of a young girl with a natural poison body. Not to mention skin to skin. After her poison body awakened, anything that came into contact with her hand would instantly turn into a pool of blood. Later, Phoenix Rouge read in an ancient book that her constitution was called the Heavenly Poison Sacred Body. It was one of the most poisonous and evil constitutions in the world. Now, her hopes were completely dashed. Not to mention the young men. Phoenix Rouge had once raised a dog. In the end, it turned into a pool of blood because it ate her leftover bones. Although Nanjiang was chaotic, it was still under the control of the Holy Church. Once her poisoned body was exposed, do you think she would be killed by all the righteous cultivators in the world as a demon? In the 10 years she had been on the mountain, Phoenix Rouge had never participated in any group activities. Every day, she would hide in the 7th peak, grow all kinds of medicine, research methods to trick people, and find a way to suppress her poison body. After all these years of unremitting efforts, she really did find something that could resist her poison body. 1,000-year snow, cicada silk. Now, she wore gloves, a mask, and used her spiritual power to suppress her poison body. She could barely take care of herself. But if she wanted to go down the mountain to gain experience and show her face in public, that was absolutely impossible. After all, the path to immortality was dangerous. Her celestial appearance was peerless, and she had an evil body. If she attracted attention and was killed by the destined person, wouldn't she cry herself to death? Senior sister, where are you going? Looking at the young girl running into the hall, Chen Qingshan's face was filled with confusion. Why? Is senior sister angry because I have someone I like? Could it be his? Senior sister, we are not suitable for each other. I suddenly remembered that I still have an inheritance to inherit from my hometown. Junior brother, I have to leave the mountain for a while. I'll leave the 7th peak to you. Chapter 624. Inheritance? Inheritance? Chen Qingshan held his forehead with a helpless expression. Senior sister, why did you suddenly fall ill again? Senior sister, what inheritance are you going to inherit? Have you forgotten that your parents died early? Anyway, I can't stay on the 7th peak for the time being. Junior brother, the mountain is high and the water is far away. We'll meet again if fate allows. Phoenix Rouge returned to the back hall and kept the bottles on the table into his chinquin bag. Then, he turned and walked down the mountain. You're the son of destiny. You'll definitely face hardships if you trigger a relationship. Moreover, judging from this kid's hesitation just now, the girl he likes is probably not a good person. Maybe she's the witch from the 1,000 Ghost Mountain. After all, he's the son of destiny. If he doesn't find some excitement, he won't be able to show that he's different from the rest. However, you're the son of destiny. No matter who dies, you won't die. Curse your parents, curse your loved ones. But I'm just a bystander. If something happens and my poison body is exposed, who will I cry to? So, I'll see you later. Senior sister, what are you doing? You can't leave. What'll I do if you leave? Chen Qingshan's voice sounded like he was about to cry. He was still young and was born in a remote mountain village. However, there was a sudden disaster. Demons suddenly appeared in the village and slaughtered everyone in the village. He was the only one who survived. Back then, a disciple of the immortal mystic sect passed by the mountain village. He pitied him and brought him to the mountain. However, his talent was mediocre and his foundation was extremely poor. Not a single elder of the immortal mystic sect was willing to accept him as a disciple. In the end, It was the old sect master who arranged for him to stay on the seventh peak. He said that he wanted to increase the popularity of the seventh peak. However, even his master ignored him every time he saw him. Only his senior sister, despite her eccentric personality, had taken good care of him since he was young. Now that his senior sister fell ill, how could he let her go down the mountain to harm others? Qingshan, I'll ask you one last time. Did you fall in love with someone you shouldn't? Phoenix Rouge sighed softly. He stopped and turned to look at Qingshan. A mountain breeze blew past and lifted the veil on her face, revealing a fairy-like face. Shouldn't? Senior sister At this point, Qingshan no longer dared to hide the truth. Just as he was about to explain himself, the Phoenix Rouge was already running down the mountain. It was as if he was about to face a great danger. Senior sister. She's a very good person. She's not at all like what everyone says. Senior sister. However, no matter how Qingshan shouted, the Phoenix Rouge did not turn its head back, as if it was afraid that it would be too late to avoid him. Junior brother, don't blame me for being ruthless. You guys cultivate to become famous, to act tough, and slap people's faces. I cultivate so that I can live longer. We walk different paths. Senior sister. I'll take my leave first. Phoenix Rouge shook his head and sighed inwardly. Dog Master, I told you not to take in disciples, but you refused to listen. Take it, but you don't care about it, so you just threw it to me to teach. Great, now I'm involved in unrelated karma. I only hope that I can slip away quickly so that this karma won't affect my destiny. But, just as the Phoenix Rouge appeared at the foot of the seventh summit, a vast wave of energy suddenly came from the void above her head. A golden handprint descended from the sky, heading straight for her head. It can't be. It's here already. The Phoenix Rouge's beautiful eyes narrowed. At least 9 talismans lit up on her body. At the same time, an ancient bronze mirror appeared out of thin air and faced the spiritual handprint. She actually ran away without looking back. It seemed that she didn't even plan to take the spiritual treasure. Evil creature, still running. A fierce shout suddenly came from the void above. The Phoenix Rouge suddenly stopped in her tracks. A wisp of spiritual light snaked in front of her like a snake, binding her to the spot. But before the gray-robed old man could descend from the sky, the figure that was imprisoned by the spirit chains suddenly blossomed with a wisp of profound light. Then, under the old man's dumbstruck gaze, it turned into a block of wood. Evil creature, I'm so angry. Seeing this, the gray-robed elder's expression changed, and he instantly became furious. Around him, a vast amount of spiritual power poured down like the sun, enveloping an area of 100 miles. Oh my, Master, don't be angry. I was just joking with you. The Phoenix Rouge's figure appeared from behind an ancient tree in the distance. There was an awkward smile on her face. You said that if you put all your effort into cultivation, would you still be a divine general after 10 years? This old man's face is going to be completely thrown away by you. The gray-robed elder snorted. He waved his hand and instantly swept the Phoenix Rouge up to the top of the seventh summit. Woo-woo. When the two of them landed from the sky, Qingshan, who was squatting on the mountain path and crying bitterly, finally raised his head and looked at them. Master, senior sister, speak. Where do you plan to go? The seventh summit's owner was called Su Yunzi. He was a white-haired Taoist. Although his gray Taoist robe was a little white, it was neat and clean. The white hair on his head was meticulously combed. His face was thin and beardless, and his expression was quite serious. Master, it's all your fault. I told you not to take him as a disciple. Look at what happened now. The Phoenix Rouge's face was filled with grievance as she glared at Qingshan. What junior brother or senior brother? You're not handsome, and you even threaten my life. If it weren't for the fact that we've been in the same sect for the past few years, I would have written an anonymous letter right now and reported that you're in love with the demoness. What happened? Su Yunzi frowned slightly and coldly glanced at Qingshan. However, he saw the latter's nervous expression and his entire body unconsciously trembled. Master, I went down the mountain a few days ago to kill a demon. He's in love with a demon. Master, quickly kill this unfilial disciple. The Phoenix Rouge pointed at Chun Shan with a face full of disdain and anger. Hearing this, Su Yunzi's eyes immediately shot out a cold light, scaring Chun Shan so much that he hurriedly knelt on the ground. Master, I was trapped in the demonic stream with Si-er at the foot of the mountain. We broke through the demonic miasma together and survived. I see. Listen, Master, you've already called him by his nickname, and he's still quibbling. Master, thank you for raising me all these years. I'm going to lie low for a while. After Junior Brother safely survives this calamity, I'll go up the mountain to visit you. The Phoenix Rouge turned around and was about to leave when she heard Su Yunzi coldly shout, Lie low for a while? What are you lying low for? My immortal mystic sect is the #1 sect in Southern Border. Are you afraid that a demon will dare to cause trouble in the sect? Su Yunzi's face was full of shame and anger. His eldest disciple was clearly very talented, but he was wholeheartedly studying crooked methods. Putting aside whether he could win or not, at such a young age, he actually learned how to hide from the world. It was simply ridiculous. No, Master, the Phoenix Rouge wanted to say something, but hesitated. You won't understand, even if I tell you. She couldn't tell her master that she had transmigrated here. She had seen no less than 5 dramas where a righteous disciple fell in love with a demoness from a demonic sect. Normally, the righteous disciple would be fine in the end, but the demoness would most likely die. However, whether Chun Shan died or not was none of her business. She was really worried that such a huge karma would implicate her. Chapter 625. You don't need to say anything if you don't understand. It's improper for a girl to be so crazy all day. Shan, you are not allowed to interact with that girl in the future. Su Yunzi coldly glanced at Shan. It was fine that his eldest disciple was a weirdo, but his youngest disciple was also a good-for-nothing. He had been on a mountain for 5 years and had not even reached Paoang. His spiritual power was intermittent, making him lose all his face. No, Master, didn't you always want me to go down the mountain to gain experience? I have thought it through now. You are right. The path of cultivation should be cut through all obstacles. I have decided that from today onwards, I will travel to Nanjiang and slay demons and devils. Phoenix Rouge suddenly stood up straight. Her beautiful eyes were filled with determination. If it wasn't for someone who understood her personality, they would have been easily deceived by her attitude. Oh, how did you think it through? Su Yunzi sneered. He clearly did not believe Phoenix Rouge. This eldest disciple of his had always believed in the great Tao proverb of death upon birth. What was death upon birth? It meant that once one walked out of the immortal mystic sect, one would definitely encounter fights. If one met someone with a higher cultivation, one would definitely die. If one met someone with a weaker cultivation but a stronger background, one would definitely die. If one met someone with a weaker cultivation and a weaker background but had a trump card, one would definitely die if one relaxed. In short, one would definitely die if they met someone. F***CK. Even though Su Yunzi had cultivated for 200 years, he had never seen such a cowardly disciple. Sometimes, he was even worried that he would scare this disciple to death with a sneeze. As I thought about it, I thought it through. Master, let me tell you, you better go down the mountain and lie low for a while. I have calculated that this kid will most likely have an ill-fated relationship with that demoness. When that time comes, the world will be turned upside down and Nanjiang will be in chaos. If you and I are implicated, the demon sect doesn't even need to do anything. The old sect master will just accuse us of colluding with the demon sect. Do you think we can still live? Phoenix Rouge sighed deeply. Her expression was somewhat desolate. She wasn't worried about her junior brother's future immortal path. Look at how many of these demonesses died in the end. She was really worried. The southern border was so chaotic. She had finally managed to sneak into the immortal mystic sect. Now, where should she go? Should he find a remote mountain and seal himself for 100 years so that he could raise his strength to the God Emperor realm? Shut up. How do you know that woman is a devil? From today onwards, the two of you are not allowed to go anywhere. The heavenly lake on the immortal mystic mountain only appears once every 100 years. My seventh peak only has the two of you. This time, no matter what, you have to fight for a spot to enter the heavenly lake. Su Yunzi coldly snorted and flicked his finger. A strand of golden light turned into two seals that landed on the two of them and disappeared. What? Master, even if you want me to die, you don't have to make it so complicated, do you? Why don't you just give your disciple a quick death? Who do you think we can beat with just the two of us? Phoenix Rouge exclaimed, his eyes filled with fear. There are only 10 spots for the Sky Lake. There were at least a few hundred southern border geniuses who came to the immortal mystic mountain these few days, right? Moreover, it was said that the sea race had always coveted the heavenly lake's fortune. In the end, they still had to fight with the sea race's monsters. TSK, this was not a dead end. This was certain death. Oh, then Master will grant you your wish now. Su Yunzi's eyes flashed with golden light. Just as he was about to raise his hand and seal Phoenix Rouge, the latter had already fled hundreds of meters away. She smiled at him and said, Master, why, the older you get, the worse your temper becomes. It's just a spot to enter the heavenly lake. I'll just fight for it. At this moment, Phoenix Rouge had already made up her mind. When the time came for the competition, she would admit defeat in 3 seconds. This way, there shouldn't be any great danger, right? As for whether it was a fortune or not, all kinds of medicine and pills. Didn't it also prolong one's life? Didn't you hear? Fortune and risk coexisted. The greater the fortune, the higher the probability of death. She couldn't win. If you can't get a spot to enter the heavenly lake, I'll announce to the world that you secretly cultivated poison techniques. Let's see how you'll survive then. At this moment, how could Su Yunzi not guess what Phoenix Rouge was thinking? However, he was not worried at all. This disciple of his had been secretly cultivating a strange technique. In fact, in order to cultivate this technique, she even planted many spirit fruits in the mountains that could suppress the strong poison. And this was Su Yunzi's method to control her. Cultivating poison techniques would bring about endless disasters. Originally, Su Yunzi was hesitant about whether he should kill Phoenix Rouge in the cradle before she matured. However, after years of secret observation, he realized that this girl was not disgusting at all. She also did not use poison techniques to commit atrocities. As long as her Tao heart was firm, poison was just a cultivation method. In southern border, there were many people who cultivated poison techniques. Su Yunzi only hoped that Phoenix Rouge could stay true to herself and not become a poison woman who brought chaos to the world. In this way, what harm was there in studying poison? What? Master, Phoenix Rouge's beautiful eyes narrowed. For the first time, a trace of true fear appeared on her pretty face. Do you really think I know nothing about what you've been doing all these years? Su Yunzi took a deep look at the two disciples in front of him. Then, he turned and walked towards the main hall on the mountain peak. The saint of the sacred sect has arrived at my immortal mystic sect. The two of you better not provoke him. Otherwise, even I may not be able to protect you. After saying that, Su Yunzi felt that it was unnecessary to say that. After all, with the temperament of his two disciples, they might not even dare to offend the outer sect disciples of the immortal mystic sect, let alone the saint of the sacred sect. The saint of the sacred sect? Phoenix Rouge rubbed her eyes. It's getting more and more complicated. Is my immortal path destined to be full of twists and turns? Senior sister, you've been cultivating for 10 years and have never left the mountain. How can there be any twists and turns? Chen Qingshan looked at Phoenix Rouge with a puzzled expression. However, she slapped the back of his head. Did you hear what Master said just now? I heard it. I want you to swear that you won't tell my secret to a third person. I swear, No, I'll draw an incantation and you'll sign it with your blood. If you dare to tell my secret to anyone, I'll let you die with pus all over your body. I'll let you fall into the 18 levels of purgatory and never be able to rise again. Phoenix Rouge cursed for a long time. In the end, she lifted her leg and kicked Chun Qingshan. It's all your fault. If you didn't go down the mountain to kill the devil, we wouldn't have caused so much trouble. Karma. This is all karma. However, Phoenix Rouge felt a little emotional in her heart. It turned out that Master knew some of her secrets. However, he probably never dreamed that she didn't cultivate poison techniques. She had the heavenly poisoned sacred body that the world couldn't tolerate. However, since Master didn't object, it seemed that the 7th mountain peak was still safe for now. Forget it. Why don't I try to fight for a spot in the heavenly lake? Why is it my fault? Chun Qingshan's face was filled with grievance as he muttered softly. However, there was a beautiful figure in blue that he couldn't get rid of in his heart. Sarah, will we meet again? Chapter 626. Immortal Mystic Ancient Sect, Golden Palace at the top of the mountain. Ling Xiao sat at the top of the palace. Beside him, Huahua and Han Qingqiu stood quietly. Below him, Helian Shan bowed. May I know why the Holy Sun has come to the southern territory this time? I heard that the heavenly lake of the immortal mystic sect is about to appear. I am curious. Ling Xiao picked up the tea in front of him and took a sip. Hee, with the saint's immortal appearance, there should be a place for you among the 10 in the heavenly lake. Helian Shan smiled faintly. Beside him, all the immortal sect elders nodded in agreement. There is one more thing. Ling Xiao put down the teacup and swept his gaze across the crowd. In the end, his gaze paused on the great elder, Feng Yuanyang. I came from the western border. I heard that a great demon has joined forces with the sea race to massacre the world. They want to destroy my saint sect. Have you heard that a great demon has appeared in the southern border? What? A great demon has joined forces with the sea race. In an instant, the atmosphere in the palace became oppressive. Whether it was the demons or the sea race, they were all enemies of the righteous path. However, there were many mountains in the southern border. It was normal for there to be a few great demons hiding in the mountains, especially Feng Yuanyang. His expression turned cold, and he felt uneasy. Great demon? What kind of demon is qualified to join forces with the sea race? In the entire southern border, only when Ruyu's group of 6 and the few remaining demons could be called great demons, especially when Ruyu's group of 6. Their cultivation was above the 5th stage. Even the Qin demon strength was enough to fight against the sect master of the immortal mystic sect. However, how could the 6 demons join forces with the sea race to massacre the world? However, if it wasn't the 6 demons, wasn't the timing of Qin Chu's appearance too coincidental? Saint, the 1,000 Ghost Mountain of the southern border has been active recently. It seems like they are about to rise again. The sect master of the immortal mystic sect pondered for a moment before speaking. 1,000 Ghost Mountain? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, a playful smile on his lips. The southern border was indeed the most chaotic place in the Shenzhou. Compared to the other 4 borders, humans and demons coexisted here, and there were endless disputes to begin with. The sea race had always been hostile to the Saint sect. With just the immortal mystic mountain, it would be very difficult to intimidate the southern border demons. As the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It seemed logical for the great demon to join hands with the sea race. That's right. The 10,000 Ghost Mountain was founded by a group of evil demons. Its sect master was a hall master of the Gonsky demon sect 300 years ago. At its most savage time, it dared to fight against the 8 tribes of the southern border. However, 20 years ago, Elder Feng Yuanyang led the righteous path of the southern border to exterminate it. I didn't expect that it would have the momentum to rise from the ashes again. The celestial mystic sect master sighed. He guessed that it was impossible for the saint to come just for the fortune of the heavenly pool. However, he did not expect that the southern border's devils would actually join hands with the Sea Tribe, massacring the western frontier, bringing disaster to a region. Now that the Chosen had personally arrived, this world was likely going to be in complete chaos. Oh, even with Elderphone making a move, there are still fish that escape the net? Ling Xiao smiled playfully. He felt that there was something wrong with this Elderphone. The sect master of the 10,000 Ghost Mountain cultivated an extremely evil technique. Back then, when I had just entered the 7th stage of the Divine Emperor realm, although I had the help of many elders, he still managed to escape. Feng Yuanyang's expression did not change as he spoke calmly. Naturally, he did not have a good impression of the Saint's sect. However, Qin Shu was currently on the mountain. He originally planned to meet this great demon's true disciple tonight. Now, it seemed that he should wait a little longer. For some reason, he vaguely felt that Ling Zhao's gaze towards him was somewhat profound. Today, the first divine emissary and I have come personally to kill these true demons that are wreaking havoc in the world. Divine emissary Dugu has already arrived at the sea realm to track down the experts of the sea race. As for me, I am in charge of the sea race. Sect Master Helion, I hope that you can support me. Hearing this, Helion Shan immediately nodded. Don't worry, Saint. The Celestial Mystic sect has always been responsible for killing devils. Once we discover traces of devils, we will not spare them. Will not spare them? In that case, I am relieved. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. Holding Han Qing Qiu's jade-like hand, he turned around and disappeared. Only when a young man's figure disappeared did Helion Shan heave a sigh of relief. However, there was a trace of profoundness in his old eyes. Originally, he did not really want to be the sect master of the Celestial Mystic sect. Back then, the 4 divine emissaries came with the divine order and suppressed him. They also said that the barbarians of the southern border were disloyal. Helion Shan was worried that the 8 tribes would be massacred. Therefore, he made a Dao heart oath to guard the southern border for the rest of his life and not let this place be shaken. Now that the saint was here, if he discovered traces of devils, not only him, but the entire southern border would bear the wrath of the saint's sect. Whether he died or not, he did not care. However, what crime did the common people commit? Inside the realm, Ling Xiao stood in front of Meng Yuan and coldly looked at the saintess of the saint's sect who had already calmed down. He did not appear for a few days. This caused Meng Yuan to feel a trace of uneasiness in her heart. Saintess Meng Yuan, I have already arrived at the southern border. Do you have anything to say to me? The first divine emissary of the saint's sect is here. Ling Xiao, you will be killed sooner or later. Meng Yuan gritted her teeth and coldly shouted. Saintess Meng Yuan, have you ever thought that even if I let you go now, other than the divine master, who would believe that you are the saintess of the saint's sect? Ling Zhao's lips suddenly curled into a smile. You! Suddenly, Meng Yuan was stunned. Even the elders of the saint's sect did not know her identity, let alone now that she had lost the divine order. The divine master had personally set up a method in her soul sea. Once her soul sea was forcefully searched by others, she would immediately die. In the entire Shenzhou, only the divine master could verify her identity. However, the divine master was currently in seclusion. It would take 10 years to 100 years. How could she make the world believe that Ling Xiao was the reincarnation of the sky demon? Moreover, the seal in your body will break one day. When that time comes, you will no longer be able to conceal your demonic aura. Saintess Meng Yuan, do you think the world will believe you or me? Seeing the panic on Meng Yuan's face, Ling Xiao coldly laughed. Have you ever thought that the Divine Master is the most powerful person in the world and accepted you as his disciple? However, he deceived the world and concealed your demonic body. Would you believe that there is nothing fishy about this? Impossible, the Divine Master said that he wanted me to sever my karma and focus on comprehending the Tao. Then why did he ask you to come into the world? Back then, the Divine Master unified the Shenzhou and killed many members of the demon race. Saintess Meng Yuan, you are so smart. Don't you feel afraid? Ling Xiao shook his head, and looked at the girl with pity. Acknowledging a thief as your master. Should I say that you are stupid or naive? After saying that, Ling Xiao did not give Meng Yuan a chance to speak. He turned around and disappeared. There were some things that did not need to be said. She could imagine it herself. Meng Yuan was a righteous person. However, if such a stubborn righteous person fell into the demonic path, she would be even more terrifying. Meng Yuan believed in slaying demons. What Ling Xiao wanted to do was to break the seal in her body and release her demonic nature. Then, the Tao that she had been holding on to would be completely destroyed. Why do you think I used the demonic will to imprison her? Is it convenient? Childish. Of course, I am using the power of the sky demon to erode the seal in her body. The Divine Master spent countless years to set up this technique. It is naturally marvelous and terrifying. However, as long as one works hard, an iron rod can be ground into a needle. Oh, grinding it into a needle doesn't seem appropriate? Damn. Chapter 6:27. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Giant beasts and birds descended from the sky at the foot of the immortal mystic sex mountain. Countless rays of divine light covered the horizon. The multicolored light was boundless and transformed into auspicious clouds. The 8 young masters and the southern border prodigies were all gathered here. A grand event was about to begin. On the 4th day, there was a sudden commotion in the immortal mystic sect. Have you heard? The useless young master of the Azure Sun Tribe is here too. Oh, you mean the prodigy of the Azure Sun Tribe? Qing Yu? Yes, it's him. That guy has been missing for 5 years. I didn't expect him to come this time. Moreover, he seems to be related to a female disciple called Phoenix Rouge on the 7th peak. He's just a piece of trash. His tribe was destroyed. What's there to be proud of? I heard that he came up the mountain this time because of an agreement from a few years ago. Oh, is it that interesting? Let's go and take a look. On the mountain path, many southern border prodigies gathered together and discussed softly. A piece of trash? A young master of a tribe? An agreement from a few years ago? At this moment, Ling Xiao stood in front of the main hall at the top of the mountain with his hands behind his back. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. I knew it. The southern border is so chaotic. How can there not be a few people with destiny? This Qing Yu's background was extremely tragic just from hearing about it. Coupled with the mockery on the faces of the extras, this person was most likely lucky. Moreover, what agreement? Isn't it just something that people with destiny like to set up? Interesting. Ling Xiao took a step forward and disappeared on the spot. At the same time, on the peak of the 7th peak, a young man in simple clothes walked over slowly, and his face carried a touch of a moving stubbornness. His name was Qing Yu, and he was originally the young master of the Azure Sun Tribe. He was born noble. On the day of his birth, he had caused the 9 stars to align and caused a vision of 1,000 miles. He was recognized as a prodigy of the southern border. However, the Azure Sun Tribe was slaughtered by the Sea Clan and declined overnight. Another tribe replaced their position as one of the 8 tribes. Qing Yu's Danxi was also destroyed in the war and became a well-known piece of trash in the southern border. The Azure Sun Tribe was exiled to the south of the southern border and lived an ignoble life. Perhaps, the brighter the star, the more attention it would attract when it fell. If you asked who the strongest monster in the southern border was, everyone would have an answer. However, if one were to ask who the most useless young master of the southern border was, Qing Yu's name would be at the top of the list. Originally, young Master Qing Yang had a cousin who was his childhood sweetheart, and the engagement between the two of them was set by his father. His cousin had a pitiful background and had been taken care of by the Qing Yu clan since she was young. However, one day, this cousin of his suddenly disappeared and cut off all contact with the Green Sun Tribe. She only sent a letter to cancel the engagement. At that time, Qing Yu was still young. He only thought that his cousin had the idea of breaking off the engagement because of him. Although her actions were heartless and hurtful, Qing Yu understood her. Later on, he found out from his father that his cousin's sister had joined the celestial mystic sect and became the first disciple of the seventh peak. I don't blame you for being heartless to me. But why did you remain indifferent when I repeatedly sent you letters asking for help when the Green Sun tribe was slaughtered by the experts of the Dark Sect? Without the Green Sun tribe, your Phoenix Rouge would have died in the hands of the demons long ago. But why did you do nothing when your clansmen were slaughtered and your father was killed? I said that one day I would visit the celestial mystic sect and personally seek an explanation from you. Now, I'm here. Who are you? Chen Qingshan sat cross-legged in front of the main hall and formed a seal with both hands, trying to form a connection with the pure gold rod in front of him. He only raised his head to look at the person when he heard footsteps in front of him. His face immediately revealed a hint of wariness. Is the Phoenix Rouge here? Qingyu's eyes were calm, and there was a touch of indifference on his face. However, Chen Qingshan suddenly jumped up and held the golden rod in his hand. He said coldly, "You're not a disciple of the celestial mystic sect? Tell me, who are you?" Senior sister had said that anyone who came to the seventh peak to look for him was to be dismissed. This way, he could avoid unnecessary karma. I'm her fiancé. Behind Qingyu, the southern border geniuses walked over one after another. They stood in front of the mountain path and looked at the useless young master with ridicule. Fiancé? This piece of trash has a fiancé from the celestial mystic sect? That's impossible. What is that celestial mystic sect disciple after? Phoenix Rouge? This name is a bit unfamiliar. She's most likely an ugly cameo. That makes sense. But even if she's ugly, she's more than enough to be with this piece of trash. That's true. The cameos began to set the atmosphere, while Ling Xiao stood quietly in front of the ancient forest and looked at the tall young man. First stage divine overlord. He did not understand the laws of Tao, nor did he have an exceptional divine body. He looked like an ordinary young man. However, he had as much as 4,000 luck points on him. Could it be another expert's rebirth style? That shouldn't be the case. Right now, he did not sense a trace of rebirth force on Qingyu, and his divine soul was not strong either. Or maybe a mortal style? It did not seem like it. Hanzhan was a mortal style model with a low cultivation level. If he did not meet Ling Xiao, it would take him at least a few decades to reach the divine overlord realm. However, the young man in front of him was already a first-stage divine overlord. With such strength, he cannot be immortal. Annulled the engagement, piece of trash. That sounds familiar. Ling Xiao's eyes suddenly flickered with a mysterious light. He had some guesses in his heart. However, when his eyes landed on Chen Qingshan, who was standing in front of Qingyu, his eyes flashed with surprise. At the same time, the immemorial demonic blade in his sea of soul suddenly released a biting, cold, demonic aura, and the soul-sucking ghost pearl shone brightly. Even the glazed ancient pagoda was covered in a layer of dark light, as if it was about to break out of the palace. 3,000 luck points, Xianqing stage. This time, Ling Xiao was completely stunned. To be able to trigger the resonance of the spiritual treasure in his body, this young man must have a terrifying fortune on him. But why is his cultivation level so low? Could it be the pure gold rod in his hand? For a moment, Ling Xiao's eyes were filled with a trace of hesitation. It was not because of this disciple model, but because he still had a luck plunder talisman that he had not used yet. Should I kill Qingyu or that useless disciple of the celestial mystic sect? What? Fiancé? Chen Qingshan's eyes widened, and he was completely dumbfounded. Why have I never heard senior sister mention this before? Are you sure you're my senior sister Phoenix Rouge's fiancé? Ask her to come out, and we will know. Qingyu's eyes were calm, and there was an otherworldly aura around him. Okay, wait for a moment. Chen Qingshan nodded fiercely and jumped toward the main hall behind him. Exciting. Senior sister said that I'm not allowed to fall in love, but now my fiancé has come to find me. Let's see how you can stop me from seeing her in the future. Senior sister, your fiancé is here. Shouts could be heard from the entire seventh peak. In the depths of the main hall, Phoenix Rouge, who was cultivating with her eyes closed, suddenly opened her beautiful eyes and there was a trace of intense fear on her face. He is here. He is here. He is still here. It turns out that I have really transmigrated into the body of a villain. Chapter 628. 10 years ago, when Phoenix Rouge woke up, she found herself sleeping on an ancient wooden bed. What he saw was a young and concerned face. At the same time, a wave of unfamiliar memories surged into his mind like a tide. Phoenix Rouge was so scared that she cried. Never in her wildest dreams did she think that she would one day transmigrate. The most hateful thing was that she was engaged at such a young age. After crying for an entire day, Phoenix Rouge had no choice but to accept her fate. Since she had transmigrated, she should just enjoy the thousands of handsome men in this world. Then, Phoenix Rouge made a decision that she regretted to this day. She broke off the engagement. It was not that she had any prejudice against Qingyu. What a joke. She was transmigrated. Although her memories were fused, how could she be interested in an 11 or 12-year-old kid? However, after that, Feng Rouge's poison body suddenly awakened one day. Her dream of becoming the Sea King of this world was completely shattered. Then, she slowly recalled the fate of the woman who broke off her engagement in the novel. It didn't matter if she thought about it. From then on, Feng Rouge had completely embarked on a different path of cultivation. Was there any woman who broke off her engagement in a good way? Either she would be slapped in the face several years later, her Tao heart would be shattered, and it would be difficult for her to achieve anything, or she would be killed by the heavens. In short, it was quite miserable. Thinking of this, Phoenix Rouge realized that she seemed to have transmigrated into the body of a villain. Damn, no wonder. People who transmigrate either have the primordial ancestral body or the Dharma body of heaven and earth. I, on the other hand, have awakened the divine body, which is the peerless poisonous body. Even if I am not hated by the world, I am still a demoness and a poisonous woman. However, no matter how regretful Phoenix Rouge was, she had no other choice. She could not go to the Green Sun tribe and kowtow to them again. Therefore, she cut off all contact with the outside world and stayed on the seventh peak. She did not involve herself in karma, nor did she cultivate supernatural powers. She only focused on escaping and sneaking in. However, now that Qingyu had ascended the mountain, she was still a stepping stone. Heavens, why are you so unfair? Senior sister, where are you going? Did you forget that Master left a mark on our bodies? The moment we leave Immortal Mystic Sect, we will explode on the spot. Chen Qingshan smiled very brightly, and there was a hint of schadenfreude in his tone. His personality was rather pure, and he just liked to see his senior sister panicking. After all, he had always been the first one to become his senior sister's test subject. What? Phoenix Rouge froze on the spot. Junior Qingshan, how do I treat you? Senior sister naturally treats me very well, but the young master at the door said that if you don't see him, he will come to see you. Chen Qingshan said with a smile. Phoenix Rouge gritted her teeth. It seemed like she couldn't avoid it today. However, she didn't say too much when she broke off the engagement. Wasn't this all about mutual affection? I wholeheartedly pursue the Tao and am unwilling to get married. Could it be that you can still kill me? In the end, Phoenix Rouge sighed lightly, and the panic on her face disappeared. She took out 3 soft armors from her Chinquin bag and put them on. There were at least 36 talismans stuck on the inside of the soft armors. Fiancé? What did I have a fiancé? Phoenix Rouge snorted coldly and walked out of the hall. She saw the young man standing in front of the hall. Qingyu. At this moment, she didn't sense a trace of spiritual aura from this young man. It seemed like this cheap cousin of hers had his Danci shattered and could no longer cultivate. She was careless. With Phoenix Rouge's current state of mind, it was easy for her to sense the uniqueness of Qingyu's identity. It was just that she had just transmigrated, and her mood was fluctuating. How could she have the time to think about this? Moreover, when people transmigrate, they transmigrate into people with a mandate of heaven. She had never seen someone who transmigrated into the body of a villain. Phoenix Rouge, looking at the mature and graceful figure, Qing Yu's eyes narrowed. 10 years. He hadn't seen this cousin of his who was his childhood sweetheart for 10 years. But he still recognized this girl who used to follow him around all day and call him Big Brother You. Even with a veil, he was still shocked by her celestial appearance. This is Qing Yu's fiancée. Damn, she's a bit pretty. Are you getting carried away? You call us a bit pretty? She's simply a peerless beauty. No, she should be a celestial being. How come I didn't know that the immortal mystic sect had such a beautiful little senior sister? Don't say that you don't know. Even if I'm a disciple of the immortal mystic sect, I've never seen this senior sister. How is this possible? How could such a peerless girl be that trash Qing Yu's fiancée? On the mountain path, everyone's eyes narrowed as they looked at the picturesque celestial appearance. They all exclaimed. Even Ling Zhao's eyes rippled. It wasn't Feng Ruji's appearance that attracted him. Although this woman did indeed have a few minutes of spiritual charm, especially that pair of eyes that were exposed outside the veil, it was mixed with a trace of indescribable loneliness. This kind of loneliness seemed to be incompatible with the world, and it actually made Ling Xiao empathize with him in the bottom of his heart. But what really piqued Ling Zhao's interest was that Feng Ruji's black robe was actually tight and split at the sides, fully outlining her graceful figure. Inside, he could faintly see two slender and beautiful legs that were dressed in white silk. No, it's a mistake. Again, what really interested Ling Xiao was the Phoenix Rouge's physique and 5,000 points of providence. Damn, heavenly poisoned sacred body, myriad poison Tao law. Ling Xiao had seen a few divine bodies and sacred bodies. For example, the disciple of the knife demon, Chu Tiansheng, the disciple of the six demons, Ning Er's Dongwang sacred body, and Ling Tian's sword vein divine body. These people were undoubtedly not blessed with providence. After all, those who could awaken a divine body were mostly protected by the heavenly Tao or involved with a trace of terrifying karma. However, something was wrong. Now, Phoenix Rouge was facing, no matter how he looked at it, she should be a stepping stone for the villain. After all, being able to be engaged to the Son of Destiny was a kind of fortune. Normally, the girl who could accompany the Son of Destiny as he grew up should have providence. But obviously, for some reason, Phoenix Rouge must have cut off this relationship on her own accord. Perhaps it was because Qing Yu was crippled, or perhaps it was because she became arrogant after joining the immortal sect. Then, today's Son of Destiny came to slap her in the face. Whose face did the Son of Destiny slap? Of course, it was the villain. But why did these two people have such terrifying providence? But heavenly poisoned sacred body. This physique sounded evil. If he could get this Phoenix Rouge, it would not only be a killing weapon, but also his life would be much more interesting. Beth? Interesting. As the plot progressed, the Son of Destiny's template became more and more mysterious. Of course, no matter what their template was, in Ling Zhao's eyes, they were just leeks. There were only a few ways to eat them. Roast them, fry them, or, at most, make dumplings? Qing Yu, what are you doing here? Phoenix Rouge's voice was clear and gentle, like the cry of a phoenix from the ninth heaven, with a trace of inexplicable majesty. Phoenix Rouge, I swore that I would come to you sooner or later. Qing Yu's expression gradually calmed down. Phoenix Rouge was indeed very beautiful, one of a kind in the world. She was even more charming than the other figure in his heart. But when he thought of the hundreds of people of the Green Sun tribe who died tragically and this girl did nothing, Qing Yu could no longer suppress the hatred in his heart. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.